Okay, so I think we're going to start. It's 3 minutes after 9, so I always want to start on time. And so it's just so you know, it's going to be obviously it's going to be a small group because there's some old timers, or I won't say old timers, veterans or something like that. I don't. Yeah. And then people who are new. You have to make sure that you pick up the agenda and sign in. And we're going to just go around and do a quick introductions. Usually I do, but while we're doing that, I'll frame it in a way, and I'll explain why that is. And then we have an opportunity to actually hear about WIDA's ongoing e-learning experience and how we started out as being the pilot. And so you just give the background. Absolutely. To that. So I'll do the introductions, and I think when we do the introductions, if you could just say, now not a full-blown story, right, but just a sentence about something that over the summer was a positive experience for you. Okay. The cultivation of positive emotional, it's called affective neuroscience. Actually helps create a different way in which we perceive the world if we start out. And there's some really interesting work done on the impact, especially for students who are learning English and are stressed out about, speaking incorrectly and all that kind of stuff. So the whole idea of, creating kind of a positive mindset in relationship to the culture of a group when you're working together collaboratively, makes a significant difference. So I'll model it. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I'm not going to do myself. So I'm Christelle Estrada. So I'm the Title III Education Specialist at the Utah State Board of Education. And for me, I think the most positive experience this summer was working in the garden in the front yard because I have xeriscape, and then picking other kinds of things and meeting really interesting people that would do the weeding for me and then cut down trees, not live trees, I mean the dead parts of the trees, just so you know. And so it was a great experience to meet wonderful new people from really diverse backgrounds doing really good work. And now I have a beautiful front yard, so it makes me really happy. Okay, we'll go this way.
All right. I am Megan Lopez. I am the Secondary English Language Arts and Co-WIDA Assessment Specialist here at the Utah State Board of Education. And a positive experience I had this summer was I just had a baby in the spring, and my niece, she is 13, and she's every bit of 13. Love her to death. She's got that sass, but it was just incredible to watch her because she was the only girl up to this point, the only girl grandchild. And then my daughter came along, and watching her just fall in love with her new little cousin was the most magical thing. And the ownership she has over my little girl has just been so beautiful to watch this bonding. I'm so appreciative of the relationship these two have in my family now.
Thanks, Megan.
I'm Jenny Cross. I'm with Box Elder School District. I'm their new English learner curriculum coach for their district. And so something that was exciting for me is I was living in Salt Lake and I moved up to Brigham City, which I'm really excited about because I love to go camping and I love to go hiking and I love to be able to see the stars at night. So it's been a really good shift for me.
Thanks, Jenny.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Heineck, and I work at Monticello Academy over in West Valley City, and I'm an assistant director there, and so I wear a lot of hats, including this now. And this summer, I grew up in the Midwest, and it was really nice to go home and see our family and be able to share in person with them that my husband and I are pregnant again, and so that was really cool.
Thanks, Lindsay.
I'm Nancy Ward. I'm one of the old timers that Christelle mentioned. I've been doing it a long time, but I learn something new every time I come, so I have to keep coming, even to the new directors' meetings. And a positive experience I had this summer. It was so fun. I have a daughter who lives in Portland, and she came down for almost 2 weeks with her 3 cute children, and without her husband. He had to stay and work. And while I love him, it was so fun to have her and the kids all to myself for 2 whole weeks just playing. So that was my good thing.
Thanks, Nancy. You have to press the button.
Well, you can hear me, right?
You have to talk into the microphone.
Okay. My name is Gloria.
Okay, you just turned it off, so you have to press it, and then see it's red. See where
Okay.
it's red? That shows that it's on, and then just talk into it.
Got it. All right. So my name is Gloria, and I work for the Dual Immersion Academy. Positive thing, I started working there. I started in July. So I'm just kind of like gather all the information, coming to this meeting. So I'm really happy to be here.
So, Gloria, what's your last name?
Oh, sorry, Tapia.
And is there something that happened over the summer that made you happy?
To get that new job.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was kind of like really excited to get that chance to work at Dual Immersion Academy.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Peggy Patterson. I'm with Salt Lake City School District. This is my second year, so I'm right with you. I learn something new, or I deepen my knowledge every time I come, so I find them very valuable. Something that happened, I worked all summer, but my 2.5-year-old granddaughter moved 5 minutes away from me, so I got her a lot this summer, and it was a big relief to her mom and dad as well, because they could have some time, but I'm just her geek, and she hangs out with me, and it's wonderful.
Thanks so much, Peggy.
I'm Dinah Scott, and I'm also an old-timer, but learn something every time I come. I'm the ESL specialist at the Washington County School District in St. George, and a good thing that happened over the summer, there were lots of things, but we had a little mini family reunion, and I met a new grandnephew, I guess. So it's great.
Thanks, Dinah.
Hello, my name is Sherlyn Imes, and I am the new assistant principal at Freedom Prep Academy. So this is new to me too, just learning all these new things. The good thing that happened over the summer is I went on the humanitarian trip with our high school students this summer for a week, and we went down to an orphanage down in Mexico and did some construction work and played with the kids, and it was a good experience to see the high school students bond with the children, and it was a good time.
Thanks, Sherlyn. So we're just introducing ourselves and saying something positive that happened over the summer. So if you could.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine May. Something positive that happened to me over the summer is I graduated college. So.
Okay, do you want to say what school you're connected to?
Yeah, I graduated Westminster College.
No, but what school are you representing?
Oh, Guadalupe School.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so Megan is going to provide us with an overview related to professional learning that comes out of WIDA. And I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm just going to say that WIDA provides lots of support in relationship to professional learning units. And based on the funding and the number of ELs, then I think, do we get 9 professional learning units? And then.
We have so many more now because we assess a ton of kiddos now.
Oh, good. Okay, but you want to make sure.
All right.
So-
Yep. Sorry. There's that red button.
Yeah. So the reason this is important is we end up getting so many more opportunities to increase individualized personal learning for all our educators. And so to make sure that we take advantage of those opportunities for our teachers is like really, really a big deal, because it's maximizing the resources related to how we're assessing our students in their growth toward becoming English proficient. So Megan's going to kind of give us
Absolutely.
the rundown.
All right, and thank you for doing that introduction because I've actually been emailing back and forth with several of you very furiously recently, just getting you all set up for stuff. So I'm going to cover just a little bit of just WIDA updates since many of you have been in contact with me recently about WIDA, and then I'm going to go into just the professional development and professional learning opportunities that you'll be able to bring back to all of your educators. So a couple of things, just knowing that many of you are new. WIDA is a consortium, and it provides a suite of assessments that we purchase as a state. We purchase the screeners and the Access 2.0 tests. So just so you know, many of you have been in contact with me about screeners and getting accounts and everything. Screeners do start now. They're available all year for any incoming students. I'm not going to read everything on this slide because I believe Christelle is making this PowerPoint available to you. But if you have any questions about screening students, please contact myself or my colleague, Anne Michelle Neal, as we both oversee everything WIDA. And then just so you know, the access test is the annual test, and the testing windows I've posted up there. If you go to our website in the WIDA assessment website on USBE's website, I have put in the ticket a while ago to have it all updated. We're in queue and waiting. So these are the correct dates though for this year's testing.
So how many, do you know off the top of your head how many tests we did last year?
We almost, I want to say around 48 or 49,000 ELs were tested. So.
Megan, I have a question.
Yes.
So like the access, is every district supposed to use the screener now?
So the way screener works is you only administer the screener to new. So if a student on their home language survey, when they enroll in the LEA in that school, if they indicate they speak anything other than English in the home, then that would trigger the opportunity to give screener. However, if that student transferred from within the state and they've already been administered the screener and access, then you would not need to anymore. If they are all LEAs
It's
are
required.
Mhm.
It's required. It's mandatory. No one has a choice. I'm just saying. Nope.
Nope. Yes, and if they came from a different state, you do need to administer it, whether they were a WIDA state or not, because they have different placement criteria. So
We have an access test from a state.
from a different state, yep. Yeah, and that's very typical protocol because we need to have that paper trail here in our state as well. So, and plus, the protocol and their requirements could most likely differ than Utah's. So,
Well, besides the fact, it's not just the entry criteria, but when you get their records, remember the way in which we identify annual growth goals based on ESSA is identified specifically related to how they're assessed when they enter and what grade they enter in Utah.
yeah.
So do you see the point? The point is that not only for tracking purposes, but if you don't have the baseline annual growth goal based on when they entered and their proficiency level, then their annual growth goals are always going to be off. And then that would trigger some other, not very good issues, which would mean that on the report card, you'd have that student who's not making annual growth goals. That would be a negative in relationship to your report card for the percentages. So we just want to have an accurate baseline, right? So that nobody's disadvantaged by creating that opportunity. Because other districts and other states, not districts, but other states, they actually have a different criteria for meeting annual growth goals, even if they're a WIDA state, because everyone's plan is different.
Yeah.
So we're good if we get a student from a Utah district to use
Yes.
Yes.
No. Right.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Thank you for asking the question. And you should jump in with questions, because I think the whole point of this is to generate the kinds of questions that Megan can actually take back to the assessment department and we can collaborate on so that everyone is clear. Because oftentimes there's, it's not like huge misunderstandings based on everybody's fault, but it's the way in which our past experiences shape the way in which we hear something, and then the common practices that we've gotten used to doing. You see what I'm saying? And then it ends up leading to disadvantaging either the students or the school, in this case, because they have a school report card.
Right.
So asking questions is really the point of really getting clear. So Lindsay?
So since we're talking about the screener, I'm noticing that there are a lot of students, since we're at a charter, that come in 6th, 7th grade, and they're answering on their home language survey that they speak another language. They're coming from a different school, and they were never administered the screener. So the last 2 years, I've been giving them the screener because that's how we would identify them, and I'm just making sure that that's appropriate.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and the other thing is on the website, all the forms related to communicating with parents, and they have to be standardized. And the home language survey has to have standardized questions. You can't put all kinds of weird stuff in a home language survey. And one of the reasons that's critical, especially now, is that parents feel very vulnerable. And so they might not put, that they have a different language other than English. Now, the reason this is important, you cannot, based on appearances and assumptions, then somehow screen the child without the parent's permission.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that actually happened. Someone emailed me, and there was a secretary who went to the principal and said, this parent put home language, and it wasn't right at the enrollment day, but it was like after enrollment day, right? When you have a really short window to assess the student. And the secretary went to the principal and said, well, it's obvious this person wasn't truthful on her home language survey. Okay, well, she did the home language survey, so you can't discount what she put there.
Yeah.
And so then the principal said to the secretary, we'll get our parapro and screen him or her right away. Okay, no, that's illegal. You cannot do that. Okay, so you go on the website, you look at the home language survey. It's in 7 different languages. They're questions that are standardized, and that's what ESSA said. Previously, people were putting questions like out of the blue.
Yeah. Some random ones.
Yeah, and so that doesn't help, because then I'll get a professor from the University of Utah who's Sudanese, and he's a professor in physics, and his child was assessed even though they speak multiple languages and fluent in English. So you have to be really careful and not make assumptions, and help the people who are greeting parents who enroll, to be really welcoming and encouraging, and not end up doing things that then put more stress on the family because they're worried about, security issues, if you know what I mean. Yes.
So to support the schools, if there's a student who they feel is struggling in class and they feel like it's a language need, and the home survey said that it was all English, you just leave it how it is at that point?
No, you
No.
would do what you do for any student, which is that you would meet with all the teachers, you'd meet with the parents, you'd sit down, you'd have a conversation. If they need a translator, you would make sure that they have a translator, and then you would support the wishes of the parents. So not supporting the wishes of the parents because they're speaking another language is problematic, because you would do that with parents who speak English. Right? And we have all this legislation, state legislation around parent rights. The point is, we're not making assumptions about that we know better for the student. So when you design an individualized learning plan for a student, then you take into consideration, and the reason this is important, people make huge assumptions related to disability.
And you can't assume a disability.
And then that is like incredibly illegal. Because just because, okay, a student whose first language is not English does not have a disability. They actually have an asset, right? And they have an advantage because it's much better to have multiple languages, especially if you're fluent in your first language. So we should be honoring the fact that we have so many students who have multiple languages. I mean, I'll give you a concrete example. At Cottonwood High School and also at Granite Institute, state legislators have made a pathway, a career pathway for youth translators in medical translation services and education translation services. And you'll have high school students who are trained as translators, and there's all the confidentiality and, all the things that are connected to that. But, we'll have parent-teacher conferences where high school students from Cottonwood, are 22 students who are now certified and on a career pathway and then hired after high school. And there were 9 versions of Arabic. So the whole goal, right, is to look at everything as an asset and a resource with children and families so they don't feel, not only disrespected, but disengaged from the community. So I hope that background helps you understand your obligations in relationship to the standardized form from the home language survey and respecting the family to include them in the parents' rights related to the education of their child. So if a child is struggling, you can't instantly assume, this is a special need. Because if they're over-identified, then you have a serious problem. Okay, other questions related to this issue? Yeah.
Yeah, we have some confusion in our district about when a home language survey is changed. So I registered this year, and I'm saying I'm English, but the child is on the float. So because sometimes parents come in and want to change that. Talk to that about how we then talk to schools about parent rights. They have the right.
They have the right to change it.
They have the right to change it.
And they have the right to deny services, just plain and simple.
So if they change it, do they need to fill out the form that denies services? If they have been on the float list, they register maybe at the same school or at another school, and then they indicate that they are English. Just walk me through that.
Okay.
I get that question all the time, and I've heard people say, you can't change that. And I'm like, they can
oh,
change
yeah.
that. That is a parent's right.
That's a parent's
to do
right.
that at any time. So kind of walk me through
Well, the simple thing is what you would do with any English-speaking family, which is you would meet with them, talk with them, share where the student is. When I do focus groups, you know what parents tell me? They tell me no one has spoken to them. They don't know what the requirements for graduation are. Oftentimes counselors say they're too busy to deal with them. They don't have interpreters. So it would be the exact same thing that you would do for a family that are English speakers, right?
I would also say this is a good idea or a good opportunity to foster some really good open communication with that family, because they may not realize, if I put English, what does that mean for my student? They may just think like, oh, I'm just going to put that now because that seems to reflect our home situation now. So letting them know.
Right. And that's why the individualized student report for every single child related to their goals and their progress, you work with the principals and say, okay, you have to download that for the child and talk with the parents in relationship to the goals and the services that are provided to ensure that that student is successful. Otherwise, it ends up being based on certain kinds of assumptions related to, parent rights are parent rights. Mm-hmm. They have the right to deny they have the right to determine the education of their child. It's not the educator who knows best.
So I think what I'm looking for is, do they need to then sign the opt-out if they've once been on? So they change it, you meet with them, you explain the services that could be beneficial,
And they want to opt out, that's fine.
But they need to sign the opt-out.
Yes, unless, here's the other question, because this happened previously. So there's some families, and you just have to respect this. They are afraid to sign anything because they think that's going to be connected to, and I'm just going to say it, to immigration status. So you have to be, the point is you have to create a welcoming relationship so that the people who are in the educational system are actually trustworthy. We've actually found in some of the work that we've done, actually at your school, at Monticello Academy, that if the families and the students feel that the educators are trustworthy, then they'll be able to trust them. Otherwise, they're not going to. I mean, why would they? I mean, think about what's going on in the country. I mean, so it's all about relationship, relationship, relationship. Okay, I think somebody else had a question. Yes. Okay, you need to use the microphone and press the.
So I work for a charter, and we receive students all the time, and like I'll go on to Data Gateway and find that this student has previously in all these years gotten the Access 2.0. They have scores, but then when they came to our school, they said that they're English, and so what I've been doing is sending that opt-out letter option to those parents so they have that option.
In their language, in a language they understand, explaining the implications of that?
No.
Okay, so then that would be helpful.
Yeah. So is that what you would suggest then,
Yes.
having it be translated and?
Well, we have it all translated. It's on the website. It's in 7 different languages.
Awesome.
So all you do is go to USBE Title III and resources. It has all the forms in 7 different languages.
Okay, and I've been working under the assumption that because they received the Access 2.0, because they were tested into being an ELL, that they were always on that list unless they opted out. Is that kind of the assumption that people operate under?
Well, yes. I mean, they have the right to opt out.
Right, yeah. So I'm just saying because when they came to our school, they said that they were English, but then I went and double checked, and it showed them as having access.
But see, it's the same thing as just the same thing. The same thing is, if it was a similar situation with someone who was a native English speaker and there were issues related to their abilities based on their past academic records, you'd actually meet with the parents, explain to them, what their options are, what the benefits are. I mean, that's really the whole point. And you're obligated by civil rights to have translators. You can't have, and the reason I'm saying this is only because I've had, lots of unfortunate experiences with advocates emailing me and calling me and saying, okay, so special ed people are meeting with this parent and it's all in English and they don't have a translator and they're forcing her to sign these papers. Okay, that's illegal. No. Right? That's really serious. So the whole
Christelle,
point.
it seems like, though, the confusion is if they put English, then isn't that the language we should have the meeting in, if that's what they've written on the
Well, yes, but they're bringing up other issues related to if they had past experiences where they had been assessed. That's the point she's bringing up, right? So the point is you just have to be incredibly clear in relationship to how you work with parents in an inclusive, welcoming role that helps them actually trust your expertise related to your best interest for the student's academic career. Because I'm telling you, parents do not generally see that. When I have focus groups, that's not what they tell me.
If they put English, it seems like it could be offensive to them if we try to provide a
So I think it would be a good opportunity. So if they put, yes, we speak English, and you say, well, I've noticed, say, as the records have been transferred,
Yeah.
we noticed in the past that your student had been taking the access test. We would love to have a conversation with you. And then if you notice, you could always offer, say, I don't want to make any assumptions. The conversation does need to be transparent, but it does need to foster goodwill at the same time.
Right.
If you would like to request a translator to ensure that that you're getting everything out of this meeting that you possibly can, please let us know, because we are obligated to provide those services to students and families as well. And so again, just approach it from we're here to support you in the decisions
Right.
for your student, and make that offer if you feel like it could be a barrier.
See, not to mention, I'm just like a black and white person when it comes to this. Okay, it's a civil rights issue.
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention, internal audits, funding issues. When you apply for Title III funding, you have to actually you give assurances that that it's your obligation to provide meaningful translation services in a language that they understand, right? So if that's not happening, then you probably shouldn't get Title III money. Title III money isn't even used for translation services because it's a civil rights obligation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here we have a couple
Okay,
more questions. I'm
Nancy.
sorry I opened a can of worms for you this morning.
No, this is
But it's good conversation.
this is the point,
Good.
though.
I'm really glad that you guys are
Nancy.
able to ask.
Okay, so we early on had some of the same questions you did, as far as, they've taken the access, but parents are putting English. And what it really came down to is very much what Christelle is talking about. Regardless of what is there, you're going to provide every service, every support, everything you can for that family. Even if they put English, you're going to do everything you can to help that child succeed. And I have had families who said, I don't want to sign the opt-out, I don't want to sign anything,
That's right.
and that's okay. We just go forward and support their child, and if they need interpreters, we give them interpreters. You do everything you can just think more personally when it comes down to the children, and less. I mean, we want to cross our T's and dot our I's and be compliant, but when you've gone through that process, if this is what you're left with, then you just do what's right for the kids.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just respond. We'll take these questions. So I just want to respond to this, because when we did the monitoring visit at Jordan, we had an amazing. I do a parent focus group, and the focus group was done. It was majestic. There was like hot cinnamon rolls that were there, and drinks, and it was a huge group of families from all kinds of different countries. And it was the most wonderful experience, because the way in which they talked about the support that was provided by Jordan School District was really amazing. And also critical issues in relationship to dual immersion programs that they wanted for their children to ensure that their students maintain their heritage language, which is an advantage for the economic development of Utah. It's not just, some kind of, aberration or whatever. And I'm saying this because I think it's really important, as Nancy said, is that whoever the child is, to develop a personal relationship with them that's trusting and is based on understanding the family is really important. I mean, at Monticello Academy, when we did a competency-based ESL endorsement and we did the final exhibition, that was the theme. I mean, the theme was all about understanding, developing a relationship with the family and the community and the neighborhood to understand the child and what benefited the child. And then monitoring the progress related to how that relationship supported the student. So it's pretty human, pretty simple, pretty compassionate around doing what's best for the child related to understanding, creating a relationship with the family, right? So that's the piece that's important. Not to mention all the state statutes on parent rights. It's not about if you speak English and you have parent rights. Okay, question?
Yes, just for clarification, if a family has changed their home language survey and they no longer indicate a language other than English, they're no longer flagged as an ESL student. I would assume they don't need to sign the opt-out form then because they're not opting out of ESL services because they're no longer on the float list for ESL services. Is that correct? I know we need to have sensitive conversations with them and make sure they understand, but once they have indicated English only, then to have an opt-out form for a student that is English only.
And they weren't on the float list previously?
No, so a student, just like we've been talking about, they've received services, we can see you've taken the access, and now you're telling us you're changing the survey, and we've said, oh, please, we can offer services. And they say, nope, English across the board, and we change it. They're not opting out of services because now they're no longer on the float list. Is that correct? I just want to make sure we follow the correct procedures, but I know we opt students out that are on the float list, but once we're English only, they aren't opting out of services.
I think one point of clarification, let me ask. Are you asking opt-out of the test or opt-out of services, all of the above?
All of the above.
Opt-out for testing forms, right?
I know there's two different ones.
Yeah.
I'm talking opting out of all of the above. If they've changed their survey, now they're no longer ESL students. So they're not opting out of services because they don't receive services now that you've changed your home language survey. And we don't encourage that. But again, parents' rights, if they've changed it to English only, they're not ESL students. So I don't imagine we want to have them opt out of services that they don't even indicate they are eligible for now.
So in this system, if they are not marked in your SIS, if they're not marked as EL, they won't be added into that big pre-ID upload. So you wouldn't have to opt them out of testing. However, I think just to ensure that those conversations have been had and you have that paper trail and record, I would highly recommend that you have the opt-out of services recorded.
Would you just opt it out the 1 year? Because after that, they won't even flag. We just have to remember across the district, here's 50 kids, we have to opt out every year. So we do indicate it in our system as well. So we have an electronic indication that says who we spoke to, who spoke to them, the date it happened, because we want to make sure we have a trail. But
Yes.
you feel like we need a hard copy trail of it the first time as well.
I would highly recommend that. But I also think having it in a couple of places would allow, like, next year, can we re-look at this child's plan and not just on a yearly basis, but obviously pull a team together, can they be considered being monitored, right, and not having to be tested. So I would just do everything to foster those relationships and that communication just to make sure the student is getting everything they need. So again, for testing opt-out, no, if they're not marked and put into that big upload batch, come late November, they don't have to opt out of testing because they're not even put into the testing. But I would for services, absolutely. Would you?
Yes. So just wait a second. So there are people who came in later and we don't really have an idea of who you are or what you represent or anything like that. So people who came in later, could you just introduce yourself? Say your name and what school you represent, and I think we're going to start. We already know Peggy. She's an old timer, so we're just going to go around this way.
So next Peggy, though.
Christy Wagner, Weaver School District.
Hi, Christy. It's nice to meet you. We're coming to visit you.
Yes, you are.
Rachel Casper, Ascent Academy.
Robin Coleman, Cache County.
Hey, Robin. How are you? We're coming to see you, too.
It's a good thing.
Julie Payne, Cache County as well.
Charlene.
Well, I'm an old timer too.
Yeah, but everybody's already
You need to know yet.
The new people need to know who you are. I mean,
Charlene Louis in Granite School District.
I'm Thais Rodriguez, Ogden School District.
Rhonda Bickmore, Ogden School District.
Deborah Bushek, Tooele School District.
okay.
Oh, Katina, Santa Maria from Guadalupe Charter.
Okay, great.
And I'll read, just for those of you that weren't here, I'm Megan Lopez. I'm USBE, WIDA, and secondary ELA assessment specialist.
And so we started this conversation in relationship to the professional learning opportunities. That was a big man. Did you see how big that guy was? Well, I'm short, so a big guy with a beard. So.
Do you want me to move on?
Yeah, so we're actually gonna move on and then make sure that all the questions you have, and we'll see if we can respond to them. Make sure Megan's here.
We had one last question.
Yes, one last question.
And then please do know though, I am always, so many of you email me and I love it. Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
I think what a lot of us are looking for is we want to support the parents with their rights. We just need clarification of what those options are, because we want to be in compliance with state law and parent rights. And so when it comes to ELs and a parent doesn't want their student in the program at all, no test, opt out of services, we don't want to I think we've been hesitant to say, okay, we'll remove them from the EL status because that's your wish, because we've been afraid that law would say, well, because they've been classified before, is that correct, that according to those parent wishes, we can say you don't?
Yes, parents get the final say.
Okay.
Okay, so you need to come up to the front here.
The clarification.
You need to come up here.
Don't be shy, Emery.
So everyone needs to be around the table. We don't have places for
Sit right
outsiders.
front and center.
As long as we have documentation
Yeah.
is what the parent wants, we're okay on that.
Yes, yes, yes.
So she said just as long as we have documentation. So I think, again, that's why we would strongly suggest that form being signed in that meeting.
And I appreciate what you added, because I think if we do it to the parents every year, they get to the point where they say, we told you once, please stop. If we need something, we'll come to you. But if a teacher expresses a concern, we've got it marked. We can indicate that we've had these conversations, and then we can approach it sensitively.
Yeah, because that's a different issue.
Can I just add one thing? In our school, we've had parents who fill out the application, I'm going to say.
So the people who just came in, you need to pick up.
The notice about it, the home language survey, thank you. But they will say no, all English, but they'll only answer the questions in Spanish. So obviously, the comment.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Of course.
So the conversation we have, because like I was saying, we've had many parents fill out just English, that my child only speaks English, but they only answer the Spanish side of all English. A conversation, it's usually a simple conversation to say, you filled out this in Spanish, but you want it in English, what do you prefer? And many times parents are like, well, I don't speak the language, but they speak the language. So then we just are accommodating to them to say, okay, so when we meet, we'll do it in whatever language you want. And they're like, can we do it in Spanish? Of course. But the child is not identified that way because mom and dad are like, they speak English great. As we go through school, if we come across situations where like, well, you know what, they're missing a lot because they don't speak English well, we call those parents right back and we say, here's what's going on. Look at what our data is telling us this is what we're happening. What would you like us to do? And many times they're like, oh, well, they speak so much more English than we do. Like, you're right, they do, but that doesn't put them in an English only. And so by having these conversations, our parents are like, oh, okay, can you do that? Yep, we can certainly do that. But it's really about coming to them with data, first starting off with, yeah, absolutely, we'll do what you want. And then coming back with information so that they can say, yeah, I still want to stick to my rule. Great, no problem. Or, okay, yeah, can we do what you need us to do? So,
Thank you. So
that's why the individual student report for every single student learning English is what you should be using.
And we follow some of those procedures in CASH as well. We just, as you mentioned, the previous speaker, we just don't know as districts what we have, what flexibility we have, and where we have to be staunch and say we can't adjust this.
Okay, all you have to do is call us.
This clarification is really, and you guys, wow, Megan is so quick to respond, and so is Christelle, so thank you. That was a great question.
Okay, so the two new people that came in, could you introduce yourselves and say what district you're representing or LEA? And you need to press the microphone here with red.
I'm Ryan. I'm in Emory, and we're just transitioning our Title III. So JR here will be taking that over, so it's
Okay.
popping up. You won't have to see too much more of me.
Ryan, we always enjoy you.
And J.R. Jones, Emory.
Great, nice to have you here. The Emory boys.
The Emory boys.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're gonna,
All right, so one thing I do want to point out that you will notice is on the KWAPT, the screener for kinder kids, on the website, it says 1 through 29. It's actually 1 through 28. I have requested several times to have that typo fixed on our website, but please know it is 28, not 29. So my typo on the website is not a high priority, though. So I apologize for that. All right. So again, reach out anytime. And I love that you guys just shoot me questions and you always apologize. Stop
You should-
apologizing.
right.
It's my job.
That's
I
right.
love supporting you all. All right. So if you are new, you will probably need a couple of accounts in WIDA. There are 2 accounts, okay? There is the WIDA Secure Portal account, and that's the one that I'm going to address first. So contact me. I need your first and last name and your email address, and I can set that account up for you. Once you have that account set up, your responsibility as an ALS director is basically to create new accounts for any and all educators in your LEA. So this we actually had conversations about last fall, and we determined that of all the district level individuals in your LEA, the people that would take ownership of account creation for the WIDA secure portal would be the ALS directors. And that would be because you guys, you're the ones that have the most communication and the most you do the most work with your EL teachers out in the schools. And we want not just EL teachers to have these accounts, we want all educators because technically every educator in the state of Utah can have an account. So I have flyers and everything on how to do mass account creations where you can just make a CSV file and send it off to WIDA and they will create accounts for every single educator in your LEA so they can have access to WIDA resources as well. So that is one of your responsibilities. So if you are new, welcome to that responsibility. If you are old and this is a reminder, please get on that account creation and contact me so I can create your account at the district level so you can have this ability. And that the button that you see is the actual button that you will see in your account of where you would make accounts for individual educators. The other account that you may need is the WIDA AMS system. So DRC is the vendor for the WIDA assessments, and the WIDA AMS system that's run through DRC is a separate account that deals with all test administration. This is where you will actually administer the tests, where you will receive score reports and everything. So if you are also going to be someone who's doing the testing for your LEA, you will also need an account. But if you also just want access to all of your reports and records and everything, this is an account you need. So again, contact me for that account. And once I set this up, you can also make accounts for the appropriate roles within your LEA as well for other people to have access to this. So this is where you manage your testing materials, manage students, all that kind of stuff. So this is also one thing that you probably heard a lot about. This is the site where you are going to be doing your COS SD transition, which I have been nagging people about. Everyone's like, don't talk about it, Megan. Sorry, I have to. I have been, oh, sorry, I think this is the slide. I'll go back to that. Not, again, going to read all of this. We started the transition back in April. The deadline for the transition was actually last week on the 15th. But knowing that that deadline has passed, please still do it if you have not, okay? Because for those of you that are doing screening actively right now, if you have not done the transition, screening is going to be very problematic for you. You could do screening, but it's going to be incredibly slow and you will be relying on DRC for all of your caching needs. So yes, things will be saved and uploaded, but you can expect students to see on average an increase of 10 to 30 seconds per question on the test. So it will take that long to load. And that's just 1 or 2 students. If you try over 3 students, it will just, you'll get the spinning wheel of death. It just won't happen. So if you have any questions about this transition, please contact me, contact WIDA, or not WIDA, contact the DRC customer support desk. They will help you. If you are wondering if you have made the transition successfully, I have access to look up to make sure your system has been transferred. So contact me anytime. So there are a couple slides in this deck that will talk about this transition. I would say the best part about this transition is that this COS, it's a new testing management, right? It will automatically update the Insight Secure Browser for all of your student testing devices. So you won't have to go and manually do that anymore. So this one-time transition will take a lot off your shoulders each year. So now back to, everyone does have a data gateway account. Hopefully you've activated your data gateway account. You do need your Cactus ID. You would have to, I'm not in charge of data gateway stuff, so you'd have to contact the data gateway help desk and account people, but you should all have this. And under data gateway, it's depending on your role in data gateway, it's either going to be under my tools or my students tab drop down, but you will see the WIDA access reports. We just got confirmation yesterday that those reports will be available mid-September. We can't nail down the date yet because it just depends on how long the load takes for IT, and that's up to the computer to decide. But it will be mid-September. We apologize, we wish we could get it sooner, but we have to go through the whole data validation process first, which doesn't get completed till the end of the summer, and then it all gets sent off to IT. So mid-September, you'll be able to see all access reports from last spring for your current students.
I think Charlene has a question.
So my question is this, because my specialists were looking at that saying, we know this is something we bring up all the time, can we get it earlier? In fact, our question had been, by May 2019, for the May 2019, it would be nice to get it at the beginning of the school year. That hasn't happened. Thank you for letting us know when it will be. However, in a district like Granite School District and anybody, that means that we probably have about approximately 100 students that we don't have test scores for that might be coming from other districts. So the sooner we can get it, the better it will be for everybody.
Yes, and I really appreciate that comment, and the more we hear that, the requests, and if you can always send that to us in formal email, it gives us more, it's not just Megan and Ann Michelle nagging people, it actually gives us more of a leg to stand on when we say this is a request from the field and here are the emails to support it. I would definitely request that, but you will always have the reports immediately available. I shouldn't say immediately, but as soon as the data validation is done in WIDA AMS for your current students. Unfortunately, we can't give you access to the new students since we only do the upload once a year, but we always, again, we strongly encourage that those reports be printed out and put into the students' CUME files that will follow them when they transfer from district to district. And sometimes you see that happen and sometimes you don't. But we would say contact the previous district and say, can you please send those over as well if it's not provided in the CUME file for the student. I know in the case of charters that have closed, there's no one to contact anymore. And we did look into it, but it's not something that we're able to do just because of paperwork and legal processes and confirming students' actual enrollment and sharing student secure information. So, but I do apologize that we can't get that sooner. We're doing as much nagging as we can, though, to get it done sooner. So we'll have another conversation with IT. So thank you for that. Yes.
seems like I was talking to Anne Michelle in the summer about duplicate reports, same student, but 2 reports, I think with probably student number problems. So when you do this data validation and before the upload, I'm assuming those reports have been merged, so 1 report per student?
So we do actually 2 different data validation processes. The first one, so right after access testing, the first one's on the LEA level, where you guys will go through, and if you see duplicate students, then you have the opportunity to merge them. If you don't, then when you get those reports back and you see, hey, I have 2 of the same, then you send that to us. And it used to be Emily Berry. We have a new data specialist. Her name is Melissa Preziosi. She will fix that in the state's data validation, and then it will be fixed. So. A lot of times she'll find them on her own, but with the 50,000 kiddos, she's not going to catch all of them. So it really helps if you bring it to our attention. Yes.
Thanks for that question.
Melissa Preziosi. Yes.
The Data Gateway report used to have a growth goal on it, and now we have the new growth goal formula. Will it have the new growth goal based on the new formulas?
Yes.
Fantastic.
So you realize how important that is, because we had to actually change the, ESSA, thanks to Ogden, actually, and their data people. And you'd be surprised how much it took to get an amendment to make sure that that was corrected, because the Department of Ed is not really approving that many amendments, but ours was approved. So thank you so much, Ogden, for being so, wily and, generous and looking at the data, your data, and saying, this is not really going to work. And so I just want to thank you for that. Make it public, too.
Yes. All right. So I went over COS. Okay, so a couple of upcoming trainings, and let's now get into the PL for educators and for you. So we do have next week some trainings. Several of you will be there. The fall trainings we have to hold in, we don't have to, but we are holding in Moab. We do kind of have to, though, I say that, with a couple of asterisks attached to that. We need to make our trainings accessible, regionally accessible to all the LEAs in the state. So, and we're going to start switching them on and off. So the fall trainings will be in kind of eastern, mid-southern Utah this year to accommodate those LEAs in those regions. And then the winter trainings will be in the Salt Lake area. And then next year we plan to switch it off. So the fall trainings will be in the Salt Lake area. And then the winter trainings will be in a different region of Utah. We haven't decided what area we're going to go to yet. It's hard to decide because we want to try to be equitable in our decisions, but it won't be in that area. It might either be more northern or extreme southern. So, or it could be possibly right smack in the middle. So we are trying to make them more equitably accessible to all LEAs. So the fall trainings, next week's trainings, we're going to be doing a screener online. There's been a little confusion in the field about that training. It's called screener online. The training is not online. The training is in person. It is for our online screener test. It's called screener online. So I apologize, you do have to be there in person. And then AMS for screener, I highly suggest this training because there have been a bunch of enhancements to screener in the AMS system. One thing that you will probably notice right off the bat is screener now has administration years in AMS, which I am so happy about. We are also offering the kindergarten model. The reason why we are offering this is not a state mandated screener, but a bunch of LEAs have elected to use the K model for their screener over the KWAPT because they find that they get better, more reliable screening information and data from the K model over the KWAPT. So we decided to offer this since many LEAs choose to use this. And this is an acceptable alternative to KWAPT. Do know that the new case screener, KWAPT, will be retired after this year. Case screener will be coming on board next year. We are piloting case screener this year. So, also do know if you are interested in the K model, you can purchase at a discounted rate because you are part of the consortium with us. So if you go to WIDA's store, it's called YSEPS, although it's spelled with a W. You can purchase it there, online or paper kits, and you can get a discount. We are also offering the Noisy Classroom because we had more PLUs to use this year, and the Noisy Classroom we're really excited about. This will be great for you and EL teachers in the classroom. This is going to say, okay, now I have the data, what next? What do I do? So this is going to be data-informed instruction and how to really foster academic conversations in the classroom. So we're really excited about that. So those are our MOAB trainings next week. We hope to see you there next week. If you can't go, you can sign up in Midas. Yes.
The case screener that's coming online, do you know if that is going to be okay to use on a tablet and they can touch?
You know what? I haven't seen it at all. I've actually only seen paper versions of it, so I can't speak to what online will look like. They always have different platforms for how you can use it, so my assumption would be, yes, there's going to be things to tap on, but let's wait till we actually see it roll out. For those of you that, because some of you have signed up to actually do some of the pilots testing of the case screener this year, maybe once we go through that process in the future, you could speak to that and what your experience was and any tips for it coming on board next year. The winter ones that we will have, we have not nailed down a location yet. If your LEA in the Salt Lake area would like to offer up a great professional development area, we would love to take you up on that. But we will be having our normal access trainings. And then we are also going to offer the WIDA model online as well, because WIDA model has, again, been growing in popularity in our state. For the grades 1 through 12 to use as benchmarking. So a bunch of LEAs are using that. So again, the course numbers for all of these are 53369 in Midas. Yes.
Will you be offering that Noisy Classroom at any other time? Really interested.
Everything is set for this year, but if we can get it again for next year, we will offer it next year and hopefully again in the fall in the Salt Lake area.
And there's no way to do an online, see anything like that? Because I just think that's would be so valuable, but it's just a problematic date for my district.
I wish we could.
Okay.
My suggestion would be if you can send one good lead and then they can bring their learnings back to a team, that might be your best option. I apologize. We've had a lot of requests and unfortunately we can't, but I'm really excited about the facilitator, Troy Dassler. He is fantastic from WIDA and he's going to be there.
So can I question on that, Megan? Yeah. So this is a trainer that's coming in?
All of these trainings that we do are WIDA trainers.
Okay.
They come from the WIDA consortium.
All right.
And
is it available for other districts to maybe bring them in as well then?
You can
if you could only do it.
You can always call WIDA and set up your own professional learning.
Maybe we should do that.
It would have to be at the cost of your LEA. But.
Well, if it's that good, I mean, we hate to wait yet one more year. So.
This actually, the Noisy Classroom was one that just, I want to say it was Illinois. WIDA kind of did a partnership and created it last year, and it was so popular that they decided to offer it to the whole consortium. And so pretty much everyone in the country is like, let's do it. And it's been, there's just been a bunch of positive just comments about it. So we're excited. After next week, I can let you know how it all goes and just reach out and let me know.
Yeah, get contact to say we really, there's some districts that would like to.
Absolutely.
Partner together and make sure. Thinking the same. Partnering somewhere, yeah.
I love this. I love it. Yes, absolutely. And, you know, bring myself or Ann Michelle into that conversation, because I've been known to haggle with WIDA. I always say, where's your bargain basement for professional learning? And they just know what's Megan going to try to get out of us every time we plan these trainings. So I try to bundle.
When you're with them.
I believe in the bundle and save approach. So, yes. All right. And then the reason why you are in charge of account creation is because there is e-learning for all. So last year, we applied to be a part of WIDA's new e-learning pilot program, and we were one of 5 states in the country to be awarded this opportunity. And so we went through the entire process, and we had a lot of good positive feedback. A lot of great learning opportunities. And the state has actually been wanting to push more towards e-learning opportunities for educators. And so this, again, is available to every single educator in the state of Utah. It does not just need to be an EL educator. We want all teachers to have these resources, because what you can learn, these are valuable tools for all students. Right, so we hear a lot of people saying, you know, what's good for EL students is good for all students. That's very true. It's not opposite. What's good for regular students may not be good for EL students, but these are great strategies and things that can be learned for all educators. So this last year, we piloted 4 e-learning courses, and this year we're happy to report those 4 will be returning, and then we will have 2 new additional ones as well. Now, the 2 new additional ones will not appear till September 1st. Those 2 new additional ones are classroom educators engaging newcomer multilingual learners, and then developing language for learning in mathematics. And those 2 are going to be shorter e-learning courses. The other 4 that you see are the 4 that are there and available right now. They all range from anywhere 2 hours it takes to complete up to 14 hours. And one thing that we have been able to do is offer relicensure points or actual USBE credit for these courses. So when educators finish these courses, they are all done through a Canvas platform. When educators finish these courses, they need to then print out their certificate. It asks them to fill out a survey to complete a certificate. Once that survey and certificate are complete and generated, then that information goes to WIDA, and WIDA sends me quarterly reports. And then once a quarter, so 4 times a year, then I can upload those teachers that have completed those courses. I can upload their credit into Midas so they can get those. So we have had a lot of great success. Veronica Castro from Logan, we were able to partner with Veronica and her team this year, and they actually developed a cohort for secondary teachers. And they created a cohort, and they had some coaches lead it based on the foundational concepts for K through 12 educators, and we had a lot of great success with that, so much so that WIDA asked Logan to come to the WIDA annual conference and present on their findings from doing that. So if you would like to maybe explore cohorts being created around this, I believe they used grant money and possibly some Title III funding to create this cohort to help teachers get through this. It was fantastic. They did it over a series of 6 weeks just after school. So come and talk to me if you would like to do that. All of the e-learning is accessed through the WIDA secure portal. And again, you are all responsible for that account creation. Questions? Yes.
Are they only available for a temporary amount of time, since we're one of these?
They're yearly, and moving forward, since the pilot was successful and they They really educators really liked having access to these to be able to do on their own time. They'll be available for the whole year. So the year is going to count from September 1st to August 31st. And so right now, just the 4 will be available through the 31st. And then as soon as the 1st rolls around, the other 2 will become available, and they'll be available all year. So if you would like to maybe consider looking at some of them on your own and then say, I might want to do a cohort next summer based on one of these, that might be more doable. But teachers have been finding these on their own, and they've been completing them as well. So, yeah.
Yes.
In our district, we have an assessment director who does the WIDA. So this is new to me. So just part of my question, it may seem silly. Do all teachers have access, or do we have to upload all teachers?
You have to
give them?
upload all
Okay, and is there a way to do
a mass upload? Absolutely, there is. So we have handouts and flyers and directions on how. So if you want to just email me, I can just send you that attachment on how to do a mass upload.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great questions. Thank you for doing that.
And then, of course, please contact us anytime. Anytime we're available. We try to normally get back to you within 24 hours. It might be, as we get busy, 48 hours, but we love hearing from you. The more you reach out to us, the more we can reach back out to you. So that is it for my portion. Thank you for letting me dominate such a large portion of your meeting today.
Well, I don't think it's dominating as much as being responsive
you.
to questions.
And it's so fun to actually put faces to names. Some of you I know your faces, and some of you the new ones. It's fun to be able to meet you after we fast and furiously email back and forth all the time. So,
Well, I'm biased, but it's a pretty spectacular group of educators.
Incredible. All right.
Okay, so we're going to take... She's going to send it to me, and I'm going to send it out.
And I forwarded it to you, so, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to share it with anyone that needs it again, so. Yeah. All right.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
So we're going to take just like about a 5-minute stand-up break and then come back so that we're going to start right at 10:25. So if you could, especially people who've been sitting for such a long time.
Thank you. Yeah, I love this group. I believe we met at, did you come to the assessment? Yes, I did. Yes.
So she's our assistant.
Oh, stop. What?
Yeah.
I love it. Oh
So
my
she's
gosh.
going to take on a big part of this responsibility.
Okay. Okay. You just hit me up, right? Okay. Oh, I shared a message too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I good to just send you an email to switch
Any
him
excuse I
onto
can
the
have
listserv?
for that.
Yep.
So just give it
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, just send it to me, and then we'll have, so we have a new person, Renee, and then she'll just put him on the list, and he'll get all the information, so.
Sounds good.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have you. How long did, so,
It was only like really last year I got it.
yeah.
So I'm just switching, so I'm still special ed, I'm still assessment. Now I'm CTE.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to be,
So, yes, we just had
I'm going to be
two
heading to
supervisors
trainings
retire.
Monday afternoon, so if you need anything, hit me up.
I'll still be
I'll
floating
be
around
available
Title I for a little
email,
bit.
but
I'm
I-
just gonna transition to
Maybe if we come out, but ending today, tomorrow,
great.
Monday.
Great, anything
till
you
the
need, make sure,
afternoon.
just email me.
Megan's been good.
And she's
Keep
great.
going, but, he may do it in person like I have, because we don't know. So if you're good with us stopping in.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
It's a lot. I know, you're probably just like, what the hell I do? But you know what, once you get it down, you're gonna be golden. It's pretty smooth, so. And then next year, you're gonna learn a whole new case for her, so there you go. Oh. And of course, you guys are rocking your Monster drinks.
They're not very cool though.
They're not cool. How do you drink that stuff?
Just never match. I've seen some studies, it's really good. It's very healthy.
Yes, well, did he tell you he was trying to push it on me while I was pregnant? Oh, gosh. You're so welcome. Stop. No, we appreciate you.
because of the September date. When I'm talking screener, sorry. In September, they can take the previous band because it's early enough in the year. I don't know if that's still WIDA's direction, but that was their direction.
Yeah.
What if we're first, though? That would be first, I feel like we need first grade screener, not go back to W15. So are you okay? I just told them we do the first grade screener. There's a cost to that. Okay. Has we ever released a guideline? I have copied ones from previous directors that say when you're that rule I talked about. When you're a fourth grader, up until this date, you can take the third grade test, and when you're a sixth grader, up until this date, you can take the fourth through fifth grade one. Is there a policy that shows that? Because I don't want to be willy-nilly. For screeners, I remember the presenter last year talked about it.
Let me look into that. I know. Let me see where I can find it, because I know. I know it's there, but you know what? If it done the last time, I couldn't actually wait until because it was time to work materials already, so. How are you doing? Hopefully I won't have to wait to find it.
I remember their point last year at the screener training. You've got a ninth grader, and in September, they aren't a ninth grade level student yet. They really are an eighth grade level, and they haven't had any instruction. So if I had a guideline, I could share it cleaner. In our district, we have the required language survey questions. And then they also have what they call additional questions. So it's like primary language, additional, and primary parent, and additional survey. Or do we need to make it standardized, and we don't have any additional?
I think on our state one, I could have thought I could have sworn we had something like that. Let's pull it up.
And the direction he's given our teachers, primary, anything in the 5 main questions you have to screen, and in the others you have options. That's kind of a conversation to say, does this student need to screen? Sometimes the father speaks French because they spent 2 years in France. And we encourage them to put that into the additional category.
Right. Do not leave before you come and help me.
Okay.
I'm just not techie, and I can't get on. I can't get on the internet. Every time I do, every time I do, all it's doing is that.
Where's your, go to your. You're connected.
But I'm not.
I would close everything and then try to open up a new browser.
And then, and open up a new browser and turn your Wi-Fi on and off.
And then make that notice might pop up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Really, my attention is to make sure we are in compliance. Parent rights are incredibly important, but so we're making sure that we didn't go against the states.
So thank you for letting me ask that question. Absolutely. So do you guys feel like we clarified on that? Are you guys feel good about? Okay.
Especially right at the end, because I think we just needed to know what options, the clarification on what options parents have. Because I think a lot of us have been the assumption that, I'm sorry parents, you don't have a choice once they're in the program, they're in it.
Yeah, the state's going to see you tested WIDA, so now I can't say that.
Okay, so yeah, you're right. It doesn't have most frequently speak at home.
So can I say the question and then additional?
And I've seen that.
If you could just look into it, if I don't find, I'll drop it. But if not, it just feeds us more information.
A few times. So I don't really think it is, but I do believe Christelle would have to confirm that.
Okay.
I've seen it a couple times here on the teacher that does that. Yeah. I think that's obvious to you.
Responsibilities, parents, and students.
I'll find out. Will you do me a favor? Just shoot me an email.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I'll just.
Great, thanks.
You're so welcome. Hi.
I'm from Queens, and I didn't know about the COS.
Don't worry.
As you were saying,
Yeah.
but there are other people involved, so I'd like to see
Yeah,
if we
yeah.
are good,
Yeah,
or if I
let's
need
see.
to follow up on that.
Yeah.
I kind of think either Kim or Rachel.
Let's find out.
And then too, I don't think I got any emails from you. Should I be on your email list?
See you. So
I don't use secondary.
You guys are
Elementary.
You guys are good. Yeah, you made the transition. You got the thumbs up. So,
I know your director wrote me, so what's going on?
I send messages out to the assessment directors because I'm in the assessment department, but I did just recently send out some communications through Christelle's ALS communication. Did you get that one that I sent? When did you sign up for her list? Let me.
You know what, it's only been not even 2 weeks probably. In the last 2 weeks.
Send that out.
Like I'm new.
Let's see.
So the first part of August.
You may not have.
Well, that's good.
You know, I sent it out. I sent it out on the 13th.
Okay, so we have a minute before we start.
So, what's your email? Does that look right? I'm just going to forward that onto you because it looks like you weren't on the email list when I said that. So there you go. Okay, and I'm going to escape out of here because I have another meeting. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're wonderful. This is a fabulous group.
Well, like I love language arts, but Yale has always been my heart because that's what my master's was. Okay, but
Yeah, well, the gap between what happens in literacy, curriculum directors, and language arts, and what these people do is like a chasm
yes,
that we have to address. Some people are addressing it.
and I sometimes I love that literature is not my first love because it helps me be like, let's take it down a notch.
Yeah.
Let's just, you know.
Thank you so much. You were wonderful.
No, you're the best. I will. Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna start, and we're gonna start with something that's not on the agenda, but was brought up by the policy committee at the University of Utah in relationship to the census, because the census, sometimes we're not clear about the importance of the census related to funding for schools, for Title III, for SNAP, for CHIP, for supporting programs that support students and families and communities and neighborhoods. And there are some, well, as far as I know, there's one district specifically, because I was at the Women's Policy Conference, and when they were talking about it, and I met with them, and I'm actually going to have another meeting with Marty, who's doing the training for census. She mentioned the great work that's happening at Granite School District. So I just want to make sure that you understand how important it is. And so, and I just found out that, of course, Charlene is involved because she actually understands the long-term implications for the next 10 years, which we should take incredibly seriously. So Charlene, do you want to just share kind of the things that you guys are doing?
Yeah. So thank you for that. This for Census 2020, under knowing that it not only affects our education funding, but it affects everything in our cities, the funding that might come through the CDBG, the block grants, everything that we know that many of us look to support all of our programs educationally. And so I had an opportunity to meet with Margarita Santini, who is heading up, is one of the workers here in the state of Utah. And so in doing so, I know she had met with Canyons and some other districts, but when I found out about Census 2020, I actually went to the superintendent or through my advisor, my supervisor, Linda Mariotti, and said, if we don't have somebody already assigned, I definitely want to be assigned to this. And especially, I'm thinking it from our lens as working with in our ALS programs with our families. Our marginalized families, some that don't really have a voice or whatever, and especially with the climate going on right now, the fear that many of them have about whatever, immigration issues or et cetera, et cetera. And so really putting out efforts to work with our community centers. We have about 33 community centers in Granite School District. So part of our plan is to not only train our community center liaisons, we're blitzing the whole district as far as administrators, principals, so they all know what's going to be happening as well. But creating these safe places for families to come in and register for the Census 2020. Now, for the Census 2020, if you're not familiar with it right now, it's going to be all on. They want to do majority of it online. So first of all, is there access to computers? Do they know how to work the computers? And they're looking at publishing it in multiple languages as well, the instructions. But once again, they're not going to fill it out unless they feel somebody is communicating with them in a friendly way or has a relationship with them. So that's one of the things we're going to do. And so, and also being even more, creating even a dwelling down to the point of, we're going to have a night for maybe our Somali families to come in. So once again, we'll have interpreters and everything. It's really going to be critical. And then I've been invited to attend a 2-day conference with the Census 2020 in Colorado for a 12-region area. And they're focusing on how do we even reach the 0 to 5-year-old children. That count is as critical as well.
Right.
And so...
so we're talking about pregnant mothers, right?
Yes, yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're really trying to reach out. So I really encourage all of you, find out what's going on in your district, and in that way we can all be actively involved in making sure that every voice is counted, every person is counted, so that we get what is rightfully ours. But it's not going to happen if our people aren't feeling comfortable to do it. And so I think we have a great opportunity to create that safe space for them.
Yeah, so Rebecca Donaldson, Dr. Donaldson from Title I and Coordinator of Federal Programs, and myself are meeting Monday afternoon with Marty Wolford, who actually is over the county office in relationship to doing training. And I'll actually send you again. It's September 5th. I can't attend, unfortunately, but it's September 5th. I'll send it out on the listserv. It's totally free, and it's about really getting clear about how you create those safe conditions and what the expectations are and how you can work together. Because, again, the numbers are going to end up influencing funding for the next 10 years. So this is pretty serious. And we do. This is the whole idea of creating safe conditions and creating safe spaces for families and communities is really important. The community learning centers is really a good idea to do that. And as well as in Canyons, within schools, they have, family centers. There are lots of family centers where we can think more strategically about how we would do that. I know Jordan has it too, and you have a great group of people working in family literacy centers. Family community. Do you have any questions for Charlene or... We'll send more information out because when I was talking with colleagues, and it was this, actually a big issue related to this, the other issue with legislators, and you probably know this too, Charlene, it's the Medicaid expansion and families, mothers, communities, they're not, all these students are eligible, all these children are eligible, and they're not being enrolled. And so then we have all these children, huge amounts of children, that have access to Medicaid and health and well-being, and they're not registered. But part of it goes back to this idea of feeling safe enough to fill out and to figure out the process of enrolling children for the Medicaid expansion, you see. So these things are really important. We'll find out more about that and send it all out to you. But we have to make sure that it's a concerted effort. We want children to be able to have, healthy experiences. At this policy conference, I actually found out from the public health, the people who were there from public health, that Utah has one of the highest mortality rates for mothers, for prenatal mothers, and also one of the highest suicide rates for mothers. So it's almost like in a third world country, which is parallel to the level of prenatal mother deaths. So I think one of the things I might do, and we'll have to talk about it in relationship to needs assessment, is some of the community agencies that are doing all this amazing work that actually have an impact on the children that come to our schools. We should think about how we create stronger partnerships and relationships with them so that, every single school actually does become a community learning center, instead of thinking, this is a school and it's separate from the community that they're actually in. So it's a different way of thinking about, the opportunities that we have. Any questions related to this before we go on? Okay, so if you look at your packet, you have a pretty large agenda that is a review of some of the many things that we've done. You also have the Utah achievement gaps, and you have the Title III classroom observation tool that we use when we do monitoring visits. Now remember, the way we've redesigned monitoring visits has nothing to do with audits. This has nothing to do with an audit, right? It's about creating technical assistance to observe classrooms in schools. And we started out in Granite and Salt Lake with a feeder pattern. And then what ended up happening, we did Uinta, we have a whole list of, we did Jordan School District that way. But then I think it was in January or February when the TSI, Targeted School Improvement, came out for student groups. And then we started planning for this year's monitoring visits. We found out that the feeder pattern thing really wasn't working because there might be, elementary schools in multiple feeder patterns, and then nobody at the middle school, but then there's a middle school here, but nobody in the feeder pattern in the elementary is connected to the middle school, and then the high school is in TSI, but they're over here, and they're not connected to any of the feeder schools, so we couldn't really figure out what would be helpful for people. So we're trying something new in Alpine. What we're doing is we're combining Title I schools, because remember, Title III accountability is in Title I. So we're trying to not replicate monitoring visits for different titles. So it's like just one thing because it's based on accountability systems. So that'll happen with NEBO, but we've organized it so we'll visit Title I schools. We'll use this classroom observation tool to do commendations for really excellent exemplary practices that we see. And so it's an advantage when you get the report that's uploaded into the grants management system. If there are commendations for your school, for your principal, for specific teachers, for different subject areas, then you can honor those teachers. I mean, that's that's kind of the intention. If there are general recommendations based on patterns that we saw, right, and in the focus groups that we do, so the focus groups are always with parents of English learners and also instructional coaches if you have them, and all the principals that we visited as well as district people, you find out amazing things by simply asking questions like, what do you consider your successes? Because you want people to identify the successes so they can build on them and disseminate them, right? So that's what you want to do. And then you focus on what are your challenges. And when people listen to each other with kind of an open mind and an open heart, then they're not defensive. And of course, the fact that I'm there facilitating, their tendency is not to be defensive, because what's the point? It's to really listen and then provide the kind of feedback that would help the districts make decisions based on, it's not like we're coming in and there's a finding and you're going to get in trouble. It has nothing to do with that. So I'd like you to look at and I'm going to give you a chance to talk to each other. I'd like you to look at the Utah Achievement Gaps data. And visually, I'm going to try to do this because there's so much confusion about the schools that were identified for targeted school improvement. There were 293 schools identified for TSI. Now think about that. It's 293 schools for English learners, just English learners, that student group. 20 high schools, 49 middle schools, and 124 elementary schools. The TSI identification is students who perform at the lowest 5% in all the academic subjects. Now, people are confused because they think it's just about WIDA. Okay, TSI is not about WIDA. TSI has a percentage, right, of what that is if they're an English learner in that student group. But it has to do with their academic progress in all the indicators for accountability. So it means English language arts, mathematics, science, proficiency, growth, right, in those areas, as well as progress in meeting their growth goals for English proficiency, toward English proficiency, and the percent of students who actually are assessed and are proficient, determined proficient, which means, you know, they reach a 5 on WIDA, which is really challenging. And the reason we do that is that oftentimes, if you have a lower standard, the problem is kids exit, right? And then everyone thinks, oh, well, they're not in WIDA anymore. And then they don't really have access to academic language from the regular classrooms, and then what happens? Then they fall apart. That's why you monitor them for 4 years after they're exited. You see, because you just keep on focusing because it gets more and more and more challenging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask just a simple question, and the question is, you can turn to do triads or partners or however you want to do it, and the question is, based on the Utah achievement gaps, what are the things that either are surprising or concerning or that relate to you specifically in the work that you're doing? Okay, so, and you're just going to have you're just going to talk about it, and you're just going to start out with college readiness coursework, and then you're going to look at scoring greater than or equal to the ACT, and then high school graduation rates, and then science proficiency, math proficiency, English language arts proficiency, and then on the back page, third grade literacy by student groups. So you're just going to look at that data. You can look at it by yourselves for a while and then turn and have a conversation based on, you know, what insights does this provide for you? What are you now thinking? What might be most concerning for you? Because remember, the student group, the whole goal is that every single student group, right, is making progress, not just in proficiency, but in growth. And I'll give you a concrete example of one school afterward, and we'll talk a little bit about what they're doing for the positive work that they're doing. So just look at the data. What do you observe? What are you thinking in relationship to the work that you're doing? And then just talk with a partner, however you want to do it.
Oh, sorry, we have to do 5, we have 6, 5
They don't feel accountable to that. They don't feel like they're teaching them to. Now, unfortunately, we're sitting in this. And they don't feel like jeopardizing their English.
Almost makes me wonder what they don't know that. It's like, and so that's what I think is a little bit don't get too discouraged. The nice thing, ours is the majority of the staff.
And then that's based on. So it's based on a couple of things, it's based on performance and at least it was. I know that everybody's moving to growth right now. In certain grades, proficiency is still very much. Because I'm just like wondering, like, if you look at your bottom 5% IDLs, and if you just took the test, they're in that bottom 5%. I'm trying to have a clear view because I have. Where are you? Yeah. And if you have it in your backpack, so that my understanding is that they're back at the DSI, these are all ready to register, and then we're going to look at the state. It is required to and we're ready for it not to. I should know better. Do you know just so that I.
Because it's in your, if you look at your agenda, there, it has, look on the back. Okay, so I didn't give you this to be horrified. Okay, so that's, you know, so that's not the purpose. The purpose is to help us face what is and just think strategically about what we want it to be. Right? That's the point. And I know some people are happy that the TSI designation has happened because it helps, it forces them to focus on student groups instead of people saying, well, you know, we care about every single, you know, individual student. And then all of a sudden you look at TSI identification for schools, for English learners, but then you look at schools and they're identified for special ed kids, for Hispanic kids, for Polynesian kids, for African American kids. And so there's some schools that have actually are identified for 6 student groups. So then that ends up being critical because the question is, well, who is achieving and who is not? And what is that about? And what can we do? Right? I mean, that's the point of using data. It's not about wringing your hands and saying, you know, oh, we're doomed, and it's the kid's fault or the family's fault or the whatever. Because that's why we're educators, right? So any comments about anything that you saw that jumped out at you? Because we're going to focus on like on your agenda, I've put lots of data in relationship to TSI so you can have information that you could better understand the implications for it. Okay, so questions and comments, yeah.
Well, just a comment. I just, when you look at the gap for English proficiency as well as students with disabilities, they're very similar. And I think it's not necessarily because it maybe some of the same students, but it's because it's a very similar barrier to access the academics. So, and you can see with the gap that we're not meeting those needs in either area. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really important insight, and that's why in the feedback that we got on the ESSA plan for Title III, their big question was, the 4 peer reviewers said, so how is the state agency going to provide technical assistance for schools to ensure that every single English learner has access to grade level content? It didn't talk about becoming English proficient, right? It said access to grade level content. That's what they said. And so that's why, based on that question, we redesigned the monitoring approach to actually go into classrooms and identify really, exemplary teachers and schools that are doing amazing work. Because then you have to wonder why those practices aren't being disseminated. You'll have one teacher in a fourth grade who's doing the most extraordinary work in science, but her partner isn't doing, or his partner or whatever, isn't doing the same thing, not learning from each other, right? And that fourth grade is not, what's happening there is not replicated in all the other fourth grades in the entire district, you see? So what we're trying to do is trying to actually identify those really wonderful, I've seen some of the best teaching practices in my entire life in Utah. I always say this, we don't have to go to Finland, or California or another country to see amazing teachers. We have amazing teachers here. So that's the function of the monitoring, to give every LEA feedback to help them see, what's really working well for students, and what recommendations we see that would help them. It's not about judging or evaluating or doing findings and demanding. It's not about that. It's about, this collaborative learning together. Any other comments you want to say about the achievement gap data? Yes, Peggy.
Question. So
Sure.
when I look at the college readiness coursework, I assume, is that AP honors, those kinds of coursework?
It is, and I think that's a really important question, considering that English learners as well as minority kids and poor kids are the most underrepresented groups in college-ready coursework. So, and when we actually took kids from Salt Lake, from East High, who had gotten 4-year scholarships at the Eccles Business School, and then other districts, and we looked at course-taking patterns.
Right.
And we actually found out that if students if they score proficient on WIDA when they're in 5th grade or 6th grade, it kind of goes like this, right? They come into school, and there are some schools that do this amazing job, and so by the time kids are in 6th grade and they're ready to go to middle school, they're either on the cusp or they're already, a 5 on the WIDA. As soon as they hit middle school, they start leveling off. They don't make progress as much. And then when they get high school, it ends up going lower. So elementary school is really this critical issue in relationship to, providing access to grade level content early on. Even, preparing the 2nd grade kids for that 3rd grade first assessment is like a huge thing. So does that help? Yeah.
I just wondered, because when you look at college readiness coursework, and then you look at scoring equal to on the ACT, it's like, what a discrepancy. And we know that those kids may not have opportunities we talked about for, prep. Or a lot of the kids take it several times. And so it's just such they just don't have the opportunity to maybe show what they know.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to say it, because, this whole thing about economic opportunity in relationship to how kids are prepared for the ACT. I know, I don't know if Jordan, I'm trying to think of which place I went and they had an ACT prep. I think it was in Jordan. I went to Jordan High School, and there was a teacher who was doing ACT prep class. East High has an ACT prep class. I don't know about the other ones, but do you see the difference between providing that opportunity, for a wide range of students, and then other kids who end up getting private preparation, and it's, a financial investment?
Taking it several times.
Because it ends up, yeah. So all these things are really connected to kind of economic well-being of our families. That's kind of one of the things that we need to be thinking about. Other comments you want to say about the gaps? Yes.
I just noticed in general that, we here in this room and other people think of, knowing a second language is such an awesome thing and an advantage, but our education system shows it as a disadvantage and a deficiency in our students, and that it really just, I guess, yeah, that's what, yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting about this is when you look at, and I've talked to Greg about this, about the biliteracy seal and the dual immersion programs. Last year, we had 6 Navajo students earn the biliteracy seal. Now, when you say that nationally to people, they say, well, how did that happen? How did you actually get that? Because the emphasis on the biliteracy seal and the dual immersion program in Utah is known internationally. But the question is, who does that benefit? Right? I mean, that's what you have to ask. When I do focus groups, the parents always say, how come we can't have a dual immersion program for our students? You see? So your point is really well taken, because we have that, but then what are the mechanisms and the finances to ensure that every single student ends up in Utah becoming biliterate? That'd be great. Yeah, it would be. So other comments or questions or observations? Okay, so I'm going to give you a chance to, so if you look at the observation tool, okay, I want you to actually, again, look at the observation tool and talk to each other. This is the tool that we use, and the people on the teams are like across the agency. So we have, content specialists from assessment. Megan has been on our teams. We have teaching and learning people who are math specialists and science specialists from assessment. And so, we have a huge group of people with academic expertise in specific areas, and usually we assign them to the secondary level. Most of us have experience in those subject areas, but also at the elementary. So when we have a team come to you, we have guidelines to prepare the LEA so that they can prepare the principals, because it doesn't really set a good tone if the observer comes and then the principal doesn't know that the observer's coming. Some principals in some schools, they actually send this observation tool out to all the teachers so they can actually see what it's like. Sometimes principals use the back part of this, which is about increased cognitive rigor, and then they work school-wide on the kinds of questions that teachers could ask that would help kids move from simple yes and no questions and content questions to more conceptual questions. Kathy Riding at Majestic actually used this for a year-long experience of observing and looking at the kinds of questions that teachers were asking that actually supported kids' cognitive development. So it's a really good tool to help you better understand, how to make grade level content accessible to a wide range of learners, right? Yeah.
One of the things we've done this year, because it was such a great experience to have that monitoring experience, and I love this tool because it so focuses on language. And so when we did our beginning of year professional development, we ALS had some time with the principals, and we gave this to all the principals in the whole district, because everyone's going to have at least a few language learners. But whether they're language learners or not, this is a great walk-through kind of a tool for principals. And we have JPAS, so we have our own evaluation system. But we thought, if we give it to every principal so that they can at least pay attention to the language that's happening in their building, it might be beneficial to the kids. That's just a thought.
I keep thinking I'm really loud, but I started using this as an observation tool for one of the observations of the month that I do, and it has been extremely helpful because we're done, and then when we review it, we can speak to these specifics, and we have a high population. We have about 84% of our students that do not speak English, and this has been awesome for everyone to kind of look back and just reassess. It's not necessarily a gotcha in any way. It's really focused on how did that lesson go? How could it have gone differently with these tactics and tools?
Yeah, and we actually added a couple things So you should use the new one. If you look at the bottom where it says key indicators of key principles, right? So this is from Stanford about students connecting and integrating ideas using languages, home language or English, cultural assets and prior knowledge. And this goes to, you know, your comment previously about, yes, we all agree that this is important, but then how is it actually integrated? And I actually saw this in Rebecca Richardson's classroom when she was teaching a group of level 2 English learners, and they were analyzing their editing skills based on something they had read, and then they were talking about it. And she said, if you don't know it in the English, then put it in your home language. And then when you talk about it and get feedback on it, then talk about it in English. You see how different that is than like people stumbling around and just being, you know, I don't know how to say this kind of thing. And it was high school students. Students deepening understandings of building on prior knowledge and ideas from others. Students' core materials and learning tasks at grade level. This whole thing about, oh, we feel so sorry for these kids, and so we're going to lower our expectations. Okay, no. Okay, you should actually use scaffolding, right, to make it accessible and comprehensible to students. That's how you learn another language. And then on the back, I inserted Hattie's strategies with a large effect size intentionally, based on learning strategies. So if you look at, and remember, Hattie's work is like 80,000 students in, 400 studies, and it's a meta-analysis. So the effect size shows the connection between these practices related to student achievement. So I just put a couple in there. Especially, the biggest thing is the learning strategies, but if you actually look at teacher-student relationship, one of the key indicators is a high indicator is empathy. Empathy for students, taking their perspective, and also not labeling. Labeling students has like a huge negative effect in relationship to student achievement. So do you want to look at this and talk about what's here and how you might use it and what would be the benefits for your principals specifically in relation? When I was over high school principals and middle school principals, a group of middle school principals asked me to come in because they weren't sure what to look for in relationship to quality instruction for English learners, which I think is a really wonderful question. It's not like you're not judging anybody, you're just walking through with them, and then you're debriefing and saying, okay, let's actually look at what happened in the classroom and then talk about why that would be good for instruction for English learners. See? So why don't you just talk about the instrument and what you notice is positive, you know, what you could use, how this impacts your thinking. We'll just do it for about 5 or 10 minutes. So just about the tool.
I like it because it's clear, and I like it because it's teachers that they will have a certain I know where I stand. And I agree with you that for all teachers have, I love the idea that sometimes because it's like all students. And that is very valuable. I mean, I talk really nice talk about and a lot of cool things that happen. And it's by doing you're instead of, you know, that wasn't really what the instructor that means the Like, I love DOT 3 because it's like exploring students have like that they have so many during the year, right? Like bring things in, and then I love the core values. This is them then they have that one because they're proud of it. Why not? And then they take general concentration. And like that's what we want is I don't want you to quote it. Yeah. What you think yourself, but I think this one yourself is that part of okay, generalize this works for me, so that would have left me yes, no, why, why, yeah. That's a really creative skill.
Okay, so take a minute to finish up your conversations.
And then the schools that you're coming to visit, are all of those TSI schools? Or
We'll talk, let me, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll just wait and I'll ask you my question.
Yeah, after. That's okay. Okay, so anybody want to make a comment either about what they noticed or the observation tool or now what you're thinking? This is kind of a metacognitive exercise I used to use with high school students, which is, before this, I was thinking this and now I'm thinking this. It's just a really simple way to help kids be more metacognitive. So any observations you want to make?
One of the things we talked about is how it's one thing to throw this out there to principals, like maybe we did, but there should be some instruction as to what some of this stuff means, because transfer strategies, does everyone know what that means? Does everyone have the same idea of what that means? Or what would be effective, or deliberate practice? Whatever it is, probably requires really, for this to be effective, some professional development in advance.
Yeah, Peggy.
Yeah, so that was one thing I was looking at here, because Hattie has a book called Visible Literacy Learning K-12, and when it talks about, there's surface, there's deep, and there's transfer, sometimes principals go in and all they want to look for is a higher DOK, and that book is so valuable in saying, in order to move to deep and transfer, they do have to have the surface learning, so sometimes that's appropriate, and you see kids really not being able to access DOK 3 and 2 because they've got gaps in. So you want to see that teachers understand where their students are and what they need, and I think sometimes observers want to see, I want to see DOK 4, and that can't be valuable if students don't know how to do those skills. So I'm with you on, you need education on how to access the different levels.
Yeah, and we actually just added these things, so this feedback is really good because we didn't have either Hattie in there or the Stanford research. We put it in there intentionally to broaden the way in which people could connect research related to actual practice. And it is interesting, this idea of, I've seen kindergarten classrooms where the teacher has designed something where, and I actually saw it twice. I saw it with, I can't remember which classroom. Might have been Canyons, might have been Davis. I don't remember. It was a first grade classroom, and they were doing, in teams, they were doing flotation experiments with all kinds of different objects, and the questions she was asking were just based on observations. And so it was really a high level. So that's the other question. And Karen Hess, who did the DOK level, would actually say that the DOKs aren't linear. So the way in which you have to think about it is how you scaffold kids and ask the kinds of questions that move them from observation, right, to more why, and then what would you do and how you're going to do it, and what model would you use. It was actually in Salt Lake where I saw a kindergarten teacher, and it was based on, I think I told you this before, the Three Little Pigs. And before that, she had them using all kinds of different larger blocks, so larger because of the, fine motor coordination she was developing. And then when I came in, she was showing them on the screen, on the whiteboard, pictures of houses in different contexts, igloos, Polynesian, all kinds of different, asking them questions about the materials and why do you think they're using these kinds of materials and all that kind of stuff. And then there was a hairdryer, and she had them dressed up as a wolf. And then she gave them different materials from the materials that they had before and had them build a house, right, with these different materials. And then had demonstrations where the students thought that they could withstand the wolf, and brought it up to a demonstration site and turned it up to low, and then asked questions. She asked these amazing questions of the kids, and they were making observations based on underlying assumptions, based on all the work she had done before, right? Then, and they were singing, Blow Your House Down or whatever that is. I don't remember exactly. And then the kids would go back and they would readjust based on the kinds of questions they asked related to what they observed, right? So that was incredibly skillful. So the question is, how do we get teachers to not dumb down the learning experience for students and scaffold it in a way where kids can do models and they can ask questions, and they, and the inquiry questions are very broad. So that's just kind of a concrete example. But I really like that idea of, what does that actually look like? What does deliberate practice actually look like? So that's a great opportunity for us to think about how we would work together to do that. Okay, so any other comments about the observation tools? Very helpful. Yeah, Rhonda, and then.
We used this last year and found out that not everyone, but the majority of our teachers were not doing that second half of the, evidence fluidity key language, evidence of language domains, percent of students talks, evidence of student engagement. And so we've developed a PD where we're having them develop prompts instead of the IRE kind of thing, but that they also include, in that prompt that they have to build the background knowledge, have to make connections to the kids, have to have supports for them. So that they're building a prompt that has all those things involved, so that then there is something to say. The kids do have something to say. I loved your illustration much better. I wish we could get that far. Maybe we will.
No, this is a really great example, is you're using a tool, but it's based on the way in which you use it connected to your context and your understanding of who the principals are, what support they need, right? To work with teachers in a way that's meaningful for the students. So the tools are there. The question is, how do you work together collaboratively wherever you are, whether you're at a charter or whether you're in a district, or with, if you're working with, if ALS is strategically working with the curriculum, department, which I think Weber specifically is doing now in a more systematic way. So then, because ultimately you have to ask yourself the question is, what impact does adult collaboration have on actual classroom practice, right? Because that's actually what it's about. See, it's really about, how teachers are learning about who the learners are and how together they're adjusting what they're doing based on the progress students are making. But if you're not clear about the kind of progress students should be making, you realize how difficult that is, right? So that's a good point. Someone else had their hand up. Yes.
I really like this because a lot of our general education teachers feel at a loss on how to help ELs.
That's true.
And they want to help, they don't know how, therefore they don't. And I like this because it's very clear, and you would need to do professional development so they know what these look like. Mm-hmm. But this is very clear. If you do these, kids will learn. And it's very, very clear that they will learn grade level content if you do these things. It's not that they can't access it, they have to have the right scaffold and they have to have the right support. And then something else that I love about this is if we look at these things, what student would not benefit from these things?
That's right.
Like what Megan was saying earlier with what is good for ELs is good for every student, and every single thing here is good for general education students, but it's essential for our ELs. And so I love that it's not, here's something extra that's completely apart that you have to do for the special group that's not going to affect the rest of your students. It's, this is essential for this group of students. It will benefit every single student in your classroom, and it's very clear on how to do it. But you have to give that professional development. I taught in dual immersion Spanish, and so I know that kids can learn content. I taught world history in Spanish, and essentially these are the things that we did, and it works. Testify.
Yeah. And, kids feel happier when they're making progress, and teachers are feeling happier and not as stressed out. Okay, great. So we're going to actually look where it says the purpose. I pretty much said this, but I've written it down for you so that you have it. I mean, I love digital resources, but if you actually have it written down, again, it's feedback to support adjusted practice, supported by fiscal decisions based on student data. Now, and that's the reason we connected the monitoring reports and the responses to the Utah Grants Management System, because it's, even though it's challenging, because I know the new system is challenging to get to know, but the fact that it's there electronically, it doesn't matter who comes in or who's in my position, or if the feds come and do audits, you'll have everything there. I mean, it's in the system. You'll have, the report, the official report, and if you look at it, we're gonna jump to the next page, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the patterns that we saw. But on the second page, this comes out right out of the technical manual for determining TSI and what is necessary for English learners. So before we go to this next step about, patterns that we saw across all the districts that we visited, just to give you a heads up, because remember, it's not a judgment, but it's patterns that we saw, across 3 or 4 districts. This kind of analysis, which is in the huge technical manual, helps you understand, about proficiency, growth, English learner progress, growth of the lowest 25%, because that's how the report cards are organized, right? So every school report card is organized that way. And then the TSI determination is if you have 10 students in a group, then you're going to have achievement scores and growth scores in all those academic subjects, and a low-performing student group is going to be flagged, right? Now, people will ask me, well, how do you get out of TSI? Right, okay, so once you're identified, how are you going to get out? At the bottom, exiting TSI for each student group. The student group in the school for which the school has been identified has to perform above the 5% cut for 2 consecutive years within 4 years. Now, when they're talking 5% above the cut, they're talking about the entire way in which a student group is assessed, which is all the indicators. Remember, it's just not, right, WIDA. That's the thing you have to make sure you understand. Because sometimes people will say, I went to a district early on, it was a rural district, and there was a middle school whose WIDA scores were fairly high. There was like, 50% of the students who had reached their individual growth goal, their annual growth goal, and 10 or 15% reaching a level 5, which the state average is like something like 2%. So we don't do very well on that. And so then the principal was really distressed because she then found out that she was designated for TSI, for EL. But it was because of the academic scores in English language arts, mathematics, and science in proficiency as well as growth, and growth in the lowest 25%, you see. So it was like all those things. It wasn't just one thing. Okay, so I've given this to you so that it's kind of a simple way to better understand it, because it ends up being really confusing. Your principals will they tend to be confused, right? Because it's a challenge to try to communicate the way the calculation was done from here, and then trying to help the people at the district understand it so they can communicate to the principals. And then the teachers, they're wondering what's going on because, it's a challenge for them. So do you have any questions about the TSI identification?
So in different sections, it talks about their growth target or adequate progress.
Yeah.
Where do we find what that is? What constitutes adequate progress?
First of all, it's individualized.
Okay.
Right? So you would have to actually go to your assessment director and say specifically to your assessment director, please help us better understand because for English learners, the growth targets, it's in the ESSA plan and it's individualized based on when they actually come in and at what proficiency level they come in. So in the technical manual, so some people never look at the technical manual, but the technical manual is really what helps you understand this.
And it has all of that in the text.
It has all of that in there, but sometimes it's I don't know. Have you all looked at the technical manual?
It's on either page 21, 22 of the technical manual. So it's like 21 through 23 is
And it's on
specifically addressed.
it's the assessment department's, under accountability, because you have to have a technical manual to actually explain to state legislators and the federal government how you've combined the accountability system.
Okay.
So that technical manual is the thing that's really critical.
And our assessment directors have that technical manual.
Well,
Or
you can access it yourself. It's actually online in the assessment department.
in the assessment.
USBE assessment department.
Okay.
But the technical manual is really important because you'll see this, you'll actually see pie charts to help you understand the percentages for elementary and secondary, and then you'll actually see how the individual growth goals for English learners is organized. but that's for WIDA, but also they have annual growth goals in relationship to academics. So is that helpful? That's the resource that you would use. Okay, so let's look at page 3. I just gave you patterns from visits of classroom observations, and these patterns are from at least 5 or 6 districts that we visited this last year. And the way we organized it, when we started we saw patterns in schools, and we got data from feedback related to focus groups from parents, focus groups from instructional coaches, focus groups from principals, that there were some serious systemic issues. So we divided it into systems change, which is always hard, right? Because people want to do what they have always done, even though it doesn't really work all that well for, certain groups of kids. And then instructional issues. So we divided it up in those 2 groups, right? And based on all the observations and all the focus groups, the things that we saw were people feeling overwhelmed by initiatives. And so the inability to review and evaluate the effectiveness of initiatives related to actually the outcomes for students. So it was like principals and teachers being overwhelmed because people kept on giving them initiatives to implement with fidelity. Do you know what I mean? And so instead of, okay, well, we're going to really identify those things that have the biggest impact on students learning English and achieving growth goals and academic achievement, right? Academic achievement in math, science, and then prioritize the initiatives based on mitigating teacher burnout, teacher turnover, and the lack of instructional focus. Because if people are all over the place, it's really, it's hard. It's hard for the principals to give feedback. It's hard for the teachers, and they just get burnt out. So if we recommend that you evaluate the effectiveness, right, of the initiatives, then you could build on your successes and monitor that and evaluate it much more effectively. And use your resources, braid your resources to align it. You could take, Title I funds, Title III funds, you could take the state at-risk money, you could take, all those, the literacy money. You could take all those things and braid them in a way that would have a bigger impact if you actually evaluated the initiatives that are making the biggest impact, right? So it doesn't have anything to do with us saying you're doing it wrong. It's just that we found this over and over again. One of the biggest issues was about the use of technology and other pull-out programs. I won't tell you any kind of the negative things, but I'll tell you one of the critical issues is that so far there hasn't really been causal research related to using one-on-one devices for English learners to become proficient. We just don't have it. The evaluation of technology often ends up being used as a way to pull the kids out, and so then they don't have access to quality Tier 1 instruction, and so not grade level content. And sometimes it has a sense of isolation, and so the kids are, all the interventions are a way in which kids perceive that they're being labeled as not good enough, and so then it doesn't really help them. So this whole thing about evaluating interventions, one principal in a rural school district was paying attention, and they had a smaller number of students, but they were doing this fidelity to this digital software, and she did not see any, in the dibbles, she didn't see any progress for the students. And she noticed that one of the part-time, I think I said this last year, one of the part-time parapros had this really great relationships with families and the community and the kids. So she went to the district and asked them to do a full-time position for her. And then she used the data and started working with them in small groups in a really strategic way. And all of a sudden, within 6 months, the Dibble scores for the EL kids just shot up. Now, you see, the thing that's so interesting is the principal is paying attention to every single English learner right? Monitoring their progress, and then looking at what's going on, and then making a decision to advocate for more funding, and then tracking the progress that the funding actually made. You see, because, she was paying attention. And the question is, how do you help principals carve out time, especially in schools where there are not that many English learners, and even if there are, there's one school district, and I'll say that it's Davis, and we had John Zerbakken actually come to the EL task force with the board members and how they redesigned the counseling program. Because one of the things, if you look at 1.3, review and evaluate the effectiveness of the counseling program throughout the district, especially high schools, based on standards of comprehensive guidance and the following issues. Clarity about equitable access to early college coursework. So if counselors are gatekeepers, okay, so that is a problem because it's a civil rights issue. They don't have equitable access. And then, so we actually had John, do you know what Davis's graduation rate for ELs is? Probably the highest in the entire country. 93% of their English learners graduate from high school. 93%. Their regular graduation rate is 95%. Now, how did they do that? They created tools, processes, and systems so that counselors met with every single English learner every quarter. It was a digital platform in which they monitored progress. Then, before school started, they had all the high school principals come in individually to the superintendency. So they had the individual principal come in to the superintendency, and they had a database showing all the English learners in relationship to their progress toward graduation every year for the last 10 years. And now they have a graduation rate of 93%. And in the beginning, there was lots of pushback, so they had to figure out how they would do it so it would mitigate any feelings of resentment or whatever. And so now systematically, when you look at all of Davis's high schools, their graduation rate for ELs is, between 89% and 90%. But it takes, do you know what I mean? Working with people and not blaming anybody. It's not about blaming, right? It's like helping people. So those are some really amazing concrete examples about looking at, and practice across high schools about AP and IB fees, fee waivers, enhancement of accelerated students, civil rights obligations. So we found this kind of endemic across all districts in relationship to evaluating support from counseling department. So, we can't have counselors saying things like, well, you can't do this because the English is too hard for you when a kid comes and wants to take a class, right? Or do you have a green card? Well, so I know you're rolling your eyes, but these things happen. I know it's hard for us to believe it, but it happens. So the question is, how do you work with student services, do you know what I mean, to actually support the counseling program to be welcoming and supportive and encouraging and not, well, this is going to be too hard for you, those kinds of judgments. So we found that systemically across. The whole thing about parent engagement, which is kind of an echo of our earlier conversation. Policies and practices that limit opportunities for children who are learning English based on deficit thinking and mindsets of educators. There were principals and district people who said this in focus groups. I'm not making this up. I heard this from principals and administrators and district superintendents. Positive approaches to ensuring civil rights of English learners to high quality instruction. Now in the grants management system as a self-evaluation tool. The issue of opportunity gaps based on educator mindsets was mentioned by parents, coaches, principals, superintendents. So, and then culturally responsive professional learning, as well as trauma-informed care and restorative justice practices can address what was mentioned by various groups in all the districts. So it's really about not thinking about any student as somehow the other, or as a subgroup, or as a marginal group, or whatever, but, this is a matter of the heart. It's like, loving every child and family as they are instead of what we want them to be. So these are patterns. Lack of advocacy for parent engagement when children are both learning English and have been identified for special ed services, specifically IEP meetings that do not include the ESL district support and translated documents. Okay, so you can't have an IEP meeting when there's a student who is designated as an English learner and has special needs, and you don't include the ALS people. Okay, you can't do that. They're not being represented, right? Because the tendency is to think, oh, this literacy goal is actually going to solve language acquisition issues for the student. Okay, no. And so if you have in your department, if you have in your district people who have that expertise, like why wouldn't you have them come to the IEP meeting? You see, I know this sounds just logical, right? This is just logical. This is what you would do to create a welcoming, inclusive environment. Investigate systematic curriculum development for parent leadership. In some of the focus groups that we had, the parents, there was this one focus group with this woman from the Congo. After she spoke and after another woman spoke, and I think she was from Mexico, the entire group, it was a whole gigantic group of people, they started clapping because the advice that she was giving and the support she was providing for parents was like the best thing they'd heard in their entire lives. And they wrote me notes about it. So how do you encourage parent leadership? This one parent actually said, it was funny because she said, those school community council meetings are really boring, but it's really important that you go because you should know what's going on. So you have this really great opportunity to create advocacy groups run by parents for parents. Not the people who think they know what's best for the parents. So that's another thing that we found. And then review allocations for translation services. We already talked about this as a civil rights obligation. The other recommendation generally for systemic changes was about coaching. So there's not much evidence at all that coaching actually makes a difference. But the intention for coaching is not about giving advice. It's about building the capacity of the teacher to make sound instructional decision based on who the learners are. So well-established guidelines for principals based on effective use of coaches. I was in meetings in focus groups where coaches had been moved. So instead of, the whole point of coaching is to build relationships with the teachers. But if you move them all the time, I don't know, how are you going to build relationships and trust if you're always moving your coaches from school to school? And the principals don't understand that the role of the coach, is not taking recess duty. That's not the role of the coach. So the question ends up, how do you really look clearly and support principals to effectively use coaches and to provide professional learning for coaches so they don't feel disadvantaged and disheartened, right? So it's just about human relationships, pretty much. It's not about being effective or efficient, and then then the results are not good for people. You have to think about the people. And of course, the quality instructions. These are all the things that we found common. Constant teacher talk, teacher talk, teacher talk, teacher talk. Okay, how do you expect anybody to learn how to have a conversation about anything if the only thing you hear is teacher talk, right? So those are just really examples, and also misunderstanding of the kind of trauma that refugee children are experiencing, children living in poverty. So, the question is how you spend your professional development dollars in relationship to helping educators really learn about themselves in relationship to who their students are. Not who they think they are, right, but how they find out who their students are. So these are just common things that we saw. across many districts. And so the districts were really great after we gave them the report. One superintendent, he's amazing. I mean, I'll send him something. I don't know if he's psychic or what. It's like 5 minutes later, he'll email me back and say, "Oh, thank you, Christelle, for sending me this. I really appreciate it." I mean, it's like really unbelievable. And then he sends people out to help the schools, based on their recommendations. And so what people have asked for is this template, like what do you want the response to look like? And so what I've learned is the more scaffolding that we provide for people, the better, so no one is anxious. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to be anxious about responding to a report. And so how do we mitigate your anxiety? Well, we create a template. We have some ideas, we send it out to people, we get feedback. So, and this is uploaded into the grants management system, so it's a template for the LEA response. If you notice, and we learned tons, and I'm just going to, and remember that the people we visit, they choose what they want to respond to. It's not like we're making anybody respond to all of them. That's like overwhelming. You have to pick, what it is you're going to respond to. So that's the template, and we're just going to look at an exemplary one. So, and I'm just going to say it's Jordan, because Jordan's here, and I want to give them credit for the work that they're doing. So here's one exemplary response. So we visited them, and Jordan was amazing because it was during that snowstorm. Remember that wild snowstorm we had in the spring? You remember it, right? Well, and then there were people, I think, from Ogden. Ron, you were coming in the middle of it. She was halfway there, and, Jordan had been closed, and we said, okay, you're coming, but nobody's there. So it was a challenge, and Jordan was so incredibly gracious, and their focus group with their principals and everybody in Jordan from the district that came, they were just so honest and straightforward and really wonderful. So it was incredibly impressive. And so then I just cut out a part of it, so you don't see their entire response, but just something that you could see. So so the question is, explain how and when you disseminated the report to stakeholders, school board, so it tells everybody that should be included. The reason we had to put this question is we found some districts, for some weird reason, never, it was a month later and none of the principals had seen the report. So that ends up being a problem because the intention is that the report is for the principals and the teachers in the school, because how are you going to honor them if you don't have it? So each principal who participated in the monitoring received a copy of the report on March. So they're very specific. So we gave them the report. The principals presented individual school feedback to their staff. Principals discussed the feedback with the PTAs and the school community council. So you see what they did? They're step by step, they're talking about how they disseminated the feedback to all their stakeholders. Additionally, the report was presented in an open school board meeting to parents, general community, school staff. Principals shared the information with, all these people. So that's the intention. The more transparent you are, it's about creating, we're all learning. It's a learning community and we're all learning together. And, this is not about they came and they audited us and, they're mean or whatever. It's nothing like that, right? If we're all learning together, then let's all learn together. We don't have to be secret about anything. Now, the thing that I think is the most impressive is it says, summarize any responses or feedback you receive from stakeholders. So this was, and I also used their entire response, and we used it for the board task force because it was such an impressive effort. Principals expressed concern about staffing. Principals expressed concern about, see, the thing that's interesting, it's all out there and transparent. Some principals examined all of the school's feedback with their leadership teams in an effort to find areas in which other schools are doing well and might be able to guide them. So do you see the point? I mean, they looked at other places where other schools in the district were doing really interesting things. And so then it was this whole idea about, oh, let's go and talk to them and visit with them. And I don't know how and then the cabinet had many conversations regarding the contents, and I know that's always challenging when you're doing it at the cabinet level.
Can I give you some feedback really quick?
Yeah.
So you're being very kind, but I will tell you, in our district, it's been really hard to get the attention of the cabinet or to take things really seriously. This monitoring visit, you're just in for a treat because it's really an opportunity. You really have to get everyone together and on the same page, and it's such an opportunity to have those who need to support you to really make these things happen pay attention. It was a remarkable experience for our district, really. So thank you.
Thank you. And then on so on page 7, I just gave you one recommendation. So they picked review and evaluate the effectiveness of counseling program, right? Because remember, that was one of the, and then, so the reasoning is create a plan to have ALS provide ongoing professional development, ensure the obstacles to enrollment are removed. So do you see what happens? You get feedback, and then it motivates people to review and evaluate. We're not telling them what to do. We're just saying, okay, look at the results of this. And then they have all these action steps and the resources, which just to let you know, Nancy, Rich Nye, the superintendent of Ogden, brought this up. He said, wow, he said, look at how they used resources in relationship to the structures and opportunities for professional development already developed, and how they're going to switch the conversation based on, and it's not an add-on, it's like embedded in the work that you're doing. So he was incredibly impressed with that, because sometimes people will think resources is just like, oh, Title III money, oh, Title I money. It's not about money. It's about structures, processes, procedures, and opportunities for different kinds of conversations. Okay. So any comments about the process? I tried to give you an example. So we organize a schedule. We look at Title I schools and TSI schools. Well, we're doing that now. Before it was in a feeder pattern. And then we bring the team out. Every group, there are guidelines for the LEA so they know what to expect so they're not anxious. So the LEA has guidelines. You'll go to one school, and I think it was Jordan again. The principals were there. They said hello. They had a clipboard with copies of this. They had the school schedule. They had the time. They had everything. So when people came in, not me, but other people that are on the team, they just felt incredibly welcomed. Everybody was prepared. All the teachers knew, and so it changes. You know what I mean? It changes the whole, like we're all in this together.
And it also makes the schools feel better to know this is what you need to have available and ready. So, because then they know exactly what to expect, and they felt prepared and less anxious.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing, because this experience is so different than typical monitoring where it's just meet with the district people and go through files. Okay, so I don't know what that means, but anyway. So it's much more, relational. I mean, that's really the point. And then we have guidelines for team members, because we want the team members, obviously, they're not doing interpretations, they're using the tool to make observations, right? They're not judging, they're not interpreting, anything like that. So we have, and also, if you want to come on be a peer reviewer to one of the, it's really valuable. So at the end of this agenda, it says, do you want to be a peer reviewer? And then I would just send it out to you, and this fall we're doing lots of them. Dinah was a peer reviewer. She even flew up and I can't remember which district it was. It was Jordan. So if you want to be a peer reviewer, and Rhonda, I think you're on the, I don't know if you're for Alpine or Weber or.
I'm not on, but I'd love to go to Weber.
Okay.
So I put that on my.
Okay. So if you want to be a peer reviewer, usually the peer reviewers come with me. I don't send them off on, like on their own wandering around. It's not good for them and it doesn't help anybody. And then we do it together. We do the observation together, and then afterward, the first observation, then we debrief and we analyze it together. And then it helps me because then I send the peer reviewer off and they go look at classrooms and then I look at classrooms. So if you want to be a peer reviewer, at the very back it says, for the feedback sheet, it says, what do you want to, when do you want to be a peer reviewer and what grade level? And you could also put down what subject too, if you're a math geek or something like that, would be helpful. Okay, so here's the last thing, and then the rest is like all the schedules that we have organized. I decided to figure out to try to get rooms in this place is really difficult. So I made dates all the way from 2019 to 2021. That was about as far out as I could do. But if you look on page 8, so here's ultimately the question. The question is, and I'm learning with you, right? So because we're designing this together. It's not like anybody in the entire country does what we do, which I think is a good thing. I think they're doing monitoring the older way, which is more like an audit, and that's not what we're doing. So when you get a report back from the LEA that you visited and they pick recommendations and what they want to work on, sometimes the quality of what they're doing doesn't necessarily address what the template is asked. Now, it's not a judgment. I'm just saying that how do you calibrate quality so that their response will motivate them to actually do what they said they're going to do, right? It's like any plan that you make. How are you going to follow through? So even though I didn't go visit, we didn't do Tooele yet. We haven't done Tooele. Tooele invited me out so we could have a conversation about what the future would look like. And so in the monitoring function, it has progress reports. So in that function, I'm going to upload this template with comments and also with consultation. So because they talked to me, they took notes and we organized a really simple format. It wasn't a format that was developed. It's just like what grew out of our conversation. And that will be uploaded into the grants management system into progress reports. See, because the question is, how do you keep supporting people? Well, if people don't ask you to help them, then you have to figure out a way to make sure that you're following up. So this is a rubric and a schedule for the next unofficial or official visit or consultation. So it's a feedback to the LEA on their response to the monitoring visit. So once you get visited and the report is uploaded into the grants management system, and then you use the template and you respond and you pick what you want to focus on, and then I read it, what kind of feedback am I giving you on the report, right, on your response? So what kind of feedback am I giving you on your response? One might be, like Nancy and I are meeting tomorrow at 1, and we're gonna actually talk about this tool and see if it works, because we're not sure. We just want to look at it and see. So if you look at it, it's feedback that I would give to the LEA based on their response, so that they know I'm paying attention to their work, right? Someone doesn't hand something in and then you never respond to them again. That's like a little disingenuous. So it's the date of the visit, the date the LEA received the USBE report, the USBE received the LEA response. Now, there are only certain questions. So the first one, based on the template, explain how and when you disseminated the report to stakeholders as well as your reasoning. Now, I put questions here. So, did the dissemination of the report include parents of English learners and in languages meaningful to the parents? See, the underlying assumption is that if you have a parent focus group and one of your recommendations is about parents, then what would the LEA do? You would actually engage the parents and let the parents know this is what the recommendation is to provide support for you. You see, if you're not letting the parents know what happened, like, why wouldn't you do that? Did the dissemination of the report include a method of ensuring that specific teacher commendations were shared and their promising practices highlighted. Okay, so the point of identifying teacher commendations is to honor teachers, right? But then if the teachers never know that they were given accolades, it's kind of like a downer. Oh, these people came and then, what happened? Summarize any responses or feedback you receive from stakeholders. Now remember, these questions come directly from the template where the LEAs are supposed to respond to what they did. Was the summary thorough with specific comments to ensure that all stakeholders, specifically principals of TSI schools, and you see I included this because now we're not doing feeder patterns, we're doing TSI schools, understand both the recommendations and the implications of the report for change practices and policies. So if we give recommendations and then the stakeholders don't really understand the implications for them, right, in their schools, then it seems like really another bureaucratic nonsense, right? Like it's bureaucratic and it doesn't impact me, and so I'm not going to really pay attention. Were the principals included in determining how the LEA developed their plan to address recommendations? If yes, what was their specific role? So if you got feedback and then you developed a plan, then what were the principals' role? Because they're the ones who are working directly in the classroom with the teachers. So to ensure recommendations are implemented, explain the goal and reasoning, action, reminder, and it says, all the other kinds of funds that you could use. Okay, so then on page 9, and this will be the last thing I'll say, then we'll be open to questions. The LEA will be monitored again next year on the progress of their implementation of selected recommendations and identified action steps. The classroom visits will be to TSI schools, and the interim report will be uploaded into the grants management system, yes or no? So when you get my feedback and kind of the analysis of your response, then just to provide more support for you, and it won't be a team or anything like that, it would just be me. I would come, we would sit down and talk as a consultation, and you would say, okay, this particular TSI school, I'm the most concerned about and would love your feedback related to what's happening in the classrooms. So you see, it's more personalized. We would figure out if there's one elementary school that's doing like a bang-up job, and there's one that is in TSI and is struggling, then how can I support you with an interim progress report that you could use, it goes to your point, as leverage to get the cabinet and the superintendent to pay attention. It's not that I have anything against superintendencies or cabinets or anything like that, but sometimes you just need, you know what I mean? You actually need a leverage point to help them pay attention. And if it's in the grants management system, which is always connected to funding, that ends up being a little bit more of a motivator, if you know what I mean, right? And then those are the schedules. These are the status of the school visits. And I've actually moved Ogden on page 10. So Rhonda, I moved Ogden from fall of 2021 up to, you want to do spring of 2020? Okay, so I've moved you up there. You're welcome. Okay, so what questions do you have in relationship to the process of monitoring, not an audit? Not an audit. And how we're trying to combine support for TSI schools and Title I, and not make them two like huge separate things that you have to go through. Yeah.
So with this reconfiguration with TSI and Title I, so you'll visit Title I schools or TSI schools only? How do we determine which schools you'll visit?
Well, I'm the one who does that. So what I did with, so Annalise isn't here, but she's not, she knows I'm going to say this. So usually, previously what I said was, and Peggy and other people that had this experience can say, I just say, and I did this with Granite. So give me your feeder patterns and let's focus on what would be most helpful for you and maybe based on the number of English learners in those schools, in those feeder patterns, right? So they sent me, pretty much, and we chose West, and of course East has a lot as well, but we chose West for just a variety of reasons. In Granite, they actually picked the Cottonwood feeder pattern because that's where all the refugee communities live in that feeder pattern. And so those schools feeding to Cottonwood, which is, they have a special program for refugee students and English learners. So Granite thought that was the best thing for us to do for them, you see. So it's this like combination of like what will work for you, right, and what could you leverage. That was kind of the thing. And it was the most English learners or a certain population like refugee students. So we agreed. But then what happened is when TSI came and Annalise sent me the feeder patterns, and I started, because I've done this already, I've identified all the, and all of you know because I've sent the list to you, in your district, all the schools and which student groups they were identified for TSI. Well, when I ended up getting Annalise's feeder patterns, the TSI schools were like all over the place. They weren't in any feeder pattern. So then in working with Title I, we became really concerned because there were Title I and there were schools that were identified as Title I and TSI for EL and other student groups. So we put together, what we do is we put together a spreadsheet and then we put the schools and I code them. Title I, TSI for EL. And that's how we do the visits. And then I send it to people so they can see, like when I sent it, I think it was to Weber, because there was a school where they had changed like boundaries or something.
There was a boundary change and a majority of those EL students would be going to a different school.
They were going to Pioneer now. So then, because we have a close relationship and they said, oh, this isn't going to work for us because now it's Pioneer, so then we just changed the school. Right. But the point is it's supposed to benefit you all. I mean, it's supposed to benefit you all. And if you have schools in TSI, you realize like 2 consecutive years within 4 years is like really a challenge. Because then what ends up happening after 4 years, the Title I schools are going to be in CSI. Comprehensive school improvement. So we're trying to, in some ways, we're trying to mitigate the potential, you know what I mean? We're trying to do it preventative so then you're not, because, I mean, I don't know, if you think of 296 schools in TSI and then all of a sudden they're all in CSI or in turnaround, oh, that sounds really awful to me. And it makes it harder for all of you. So we're just trying to figure out how to get ahead of it, right? So we all don't end up in that situation. Questions before we?
Not so much a question, but just a comment. I have a new student in the building who has never been to a formal education before. He's in 2nd grade and just entered the United States about, it would have been 2 weeks on Monday. And so when he's in my 2nd grade class with one of my teachers who knows both languages and is able to really support him, when we talk about the experience of our students, how critical that is, it was evident here more than anything else because he was so excited to be inside a building. He was like, this is for me, everything was new. And so as the classroom rules and procedures for schools are discussed, for him, it's more example work. And because so many of his peers in the class also speak Spanish, it's an opportunity for them to do it in both languages. So it was really a neat experience to observe that happening. This is an English-only school. That's what we teach. But in this situation, it was amazing to see the teacher teaching him in Spanish, the students, his friends teaching him about simple things as classroom procedures and rules. So now this little boy understands the rules of the school because all of that time was taken for that. And it was great to see that personalization, and it helped every child in that classroom.
I think that's a really good example. I mean, Lindsay, do I want to put you on the spot? So I'll put you on the spot. So Lindsay, so I met with Monticello, was it last year? The year before last, or something like that, I don't know. And we decided that she would attend my University of Utah cohort class about competency-based, earning a competency-based ESL endorsement based on setting individual growth goals and using evidence, based on the TESOL standards. And so when we did the final exhibition at her school, you want to say a little bit about the experience?
Sorry, I just put mint in my mouth. But the final exhibition with, I think we had 8 teachers that ended up completing this program. And like Christelle was saying earlier, almost every single teacher came back to this idea that they had developed relationships with students that they just didn't know that they could develop these deep relationships with the kids. And it was 8 adults sitting around basically crying for a few hours talking about these things, because the experiences that every single one of us had in this program were incredibly hard, but so rewarding. I think for all of the teachers, it's been the most rewarding thing that any of them have done. And because they were setting very personal goals, no 2 people had the same total experience, but everyone had that same outcome of it being essential to build these relationships and essential to really think about our students as individuals instead of as a group, which we were just talking earlier about how every teacher says that, but then when you have to practice that, it becomes so difficult. And our teachers really were able to see the growth that putting that extra time and that extra effort into those kids made.
Yeah, there was actually one teacher who, her goal was something about developing an anti-bias curriculum. What grade was she? Second grade. At the end, and her final exhibition was amazing. We used a success analysis protocol, and midway we did a tuning protocol to help people focus more clearly on the evidence they were using to show mastery. And, she said, I never knew really how to teach English learners, and now I know I can. And she just burst into tears. And it goes back to what people have said about, it's not about ill will, it's not about any of that. It's about not knowing how, and then not even knowing how to ask, the question, the kind of help that you need, because you don't really know, right?
To say something else, she specifically this year, we're pushing this out to the rest of our staff, and we're talking about it. And she was saying that already, just in even the week before school started, we had our Meet the Teacher night, and she called all the parents, and she made sure to really make that first contact. And that having that first interaction with the parents, she said the fear she used to feel around talking to parents who didn't speak the same language as her was gone, because she now knows that it's okay to ask certain questions, and it's okay to not know things. And she just had her mind opened in a way that if I had had her sit through courses that someone else had designed, she just never would have gotten a true education and changed. And that was really what it was about, was people changing their mindset and changing their practice.
Yeah, and we actually wrote this into the new ALS board rule, where it talks about qualified teacher. It actually says competency-based programs approved and designed with the help of USBE. So it does make a significant difference when the way in which you use the goals actually is connected to your actual practice in the classroom. And, I don't have anything, I'm not against taking courses or, getting degrees, or I'm not against any of that. But the impact that we saw with our group at the university, as well as Monticello, the assistant principal talked about she's an assistant principal. So she went through the whole program, and as she did too, it was a whole year cohort that we worked, and that Lindsay kind of replicated what we did at the university. And the thing that was interesting is she found out so much about this little girl that she was working with, and the way she designed these flashcards to fit this little girl's hand, and then how they used this method of informal conversation and then meeting with the family. It was a girl who didn't have formal education, right? So interrupted formal education, but it was because the terrorist group in Peru, were wandering around with AK-47s, and so then the children didn't go to school. So you see, these things open up our heart, obviously, because we don't have those experiences. And we don't even, if we don't take time, we don't really even understand that the children have those experiences, because we have conceptually, like, we have no understanding of what that would be like for a child or for a family trying to protect her children from, these things. So they're wonderful examples. They're like extraordinary teachers. I mean, I could give you a whole list later on. We're going to meet again and we're going to talk. And the next time we meet, we're going to really identify some exemplary practices to help you and think through what you would actually do, and then working with each other, because the way in which technical assistance is provided to schools and classrooms and creating leadership opportunities for principals to change their own mindsets, we all have a great opportunity to do that. So it's really, a privilege to work with you. And so I just want to thank you. Any last statements before we're 15 minutes ahead of time? Anybody wants to stay after and chat a little bit, I'm always free. Thank you so much.